4 of my patients have 1 billion followers. Justin Bieber, Miley Cyrus, Bella Hadid. And we looked at their brains. And what we found is...
Thank you so much, Dr. Amen.
Dr. Daniel Amen.
He's a clinical neuroscientist, New York Times best-selling author,
one of America's leading psychiatrists and brain health experts.
Why do you do what you do?
I have to do what I do. Someone I love tried to kill herself. If she would have died, I think I would have always been left with a hole in my soul. Most psychiatric illnesses are not mental illnesses. They're brain health issues. When you reimagine mental health as brain health, it changes everything. So you want to damage your brain? Do not engage in new learning. Don't ever eat fish, never floss, play football, marijuana, alcohol, nicotine, caffeine. It's a drug. You want to keep your brain healthy? It takes 3 seconds. So, do you know about the ACE quiz? It's 10 of the most common childhood traumas. If you have 4 or more, you have an increased risk of 7 of the top 10 leading causes of death. If you have 6 or more, you die 20 years earlier.
Is there something that can be done to change it?
Absolutely. If you came to see me, I would have you...
Before this episode starts, I have a small favor to ask from you. 2 months ago, 74% of people that watch this channel didn't subscribe. We're now down to 69%. My goal is 50%. So if you've ever liked any of the videos we've posted, if you like this channel, can you do me a quick favor and hit the subscribe button? It helps this channel more than you know, and the bigger the channel gets, as you've seen, the bigger the guests get. Thank you and enjoy this episode. Dr. Amen, why do you do what you do?
It's part of my soul. I have to do what I do. The short story, so I got to do what I do, is when I was 18, Vietnam was still going on, and I had a low draft number, and I became an infantry medic where my love of medicine was born. But about a year into it, I realized I didn't like being shot at. It was irritating. It was horrifying. And I got myself retrained as an X-ray technician and just developed a passion for medical imaging. As our professors used to say, how do you know unless you look? And that became a theme for my life. And then I got out of the Army in 1975 and finished college, and when I was a second-year medical student, someone I loved tried to kill herself. And I was horrified. I had no idea what to do. And I took her to see the chief of the Department of Psychiatry, where I went to medical school. And I realized if he helped her, it wouldn't just help her, that ultimately it would help her children and even her grandchildren, as they would be shaped by someone who was happier and more stable. I fell in love with psychiatry, 1979, so 44 years ago, and I've loved it every day since. But I fell in love with the only medical specialty that never looks at the organ it treats. And even back then, I'm like, why aren't we looking at the brain? I mean, obviously, the brain is the organ of depression. The brain is the organ of bipolar disorder. The brain is the organ of anxiety. Why aren't we looking at it? And they said, that's the future. We will, but not yet. And growing up, my dad thought I was sort of a pain in the ass. He called me a maverick because I didn't just accept what he said. And it turns out it's true, and I'm pushing we should be looking at the brain. In 1991, so I've been a psychiatrist almost a decade, I went to my first lecture on brain SPECT imaging. SPECT is a nuclear medicine study that looks at blood flow and activity. It looks at how your brain works. And it basically shows us 3 things: good activity, too little, or too much. And then it rocked my world. I mean, it's explosion in my world. It's like, I have to look. How do I know unless I look? And the lessons just kept coming. That the first lesson, most psychiatric illnesses are not mental illnesses. They're brain health issues. If I get your brain healthy, well, your mind tends to follow, because your brain, the physical moment by moment functioning of your brain, creates your mind. And if your brain isn't healthy, your mind isn't healthy. So that was the first lesson. And I'm like, these are not mental illnesses. And when you reimagine mental health as brain health, it changes everything. It changed everything I do as a psychiatrist. Most psychiatrists, you go to them and you go, I'm depressed. And then they'll give you a diagnosis with the same name of what you just told them. They'll go, you're depressed. And then put you on an antidepressant, which in large-scale studies work no better than placebo. And I'm like, so next lesson, depression is like chest pain. It doesn't tell you what causes it, and it doesn't tell you what to do for it. But we have whole industries built on money for medicine for mental health conditions. And I think it's complete crap, because they're not looking at the organ. They don't know, is it from head trauma? Is it from an infection? Is it from a lousy diet? Is it from being sedentary? Is it because you don't know how to manage your mind? And I then learned that mild traumatic brain injury is a major cause of psychiatric problems. And nobody knows about it because they don't look at the brain. And I was just like a little kid, so excited. I still am. 32 years later, we've done 225,000 scans. And it's so fun to be in the future helping people get well. So I have to do it. I know that's a long answer.
I like long answers. You'll come to learn that. You've written so many books, and you seem to have the same energy you've always had about this subject matter. When you if you were to encapsulate or to summarize the mission that you're on, which is the source of all that energy, what is that mission that you're on?
The mission is to end the concept of mental illness by creating a revolution in brain health. And that mission just evolved. You know, my mission when I graduated from medical school was to be a really good psychiatrist, because it's personal to me, and to be a writer. I wrote my first book the year I graduated from medical school, and I found I love the process, that writing brings me joy, that when I can take complex concepts and make them really easy to understand, and that's helpful to someone, I love that. That's joyful to me. And that skill has served my career so well, because my books bring a lot of people to, we have 11 clinics around the US, and they often come because they've read one of my books. So they serve the purpose of educating and then allowing us to do the work we love doing.
If someone's listening to this and they've never really taken the time to learn about the brain before, because they don't necessarily think it's so important, they understand things about dieting or whatever else, but the brain, they kind of just assume it's there, right? Like a lot of people do. What case would you make to them about the importance of positive, healthy, cognitive functions and brain health? What is the case? Why does it matter to the ordinary person? Say if they don't have a psychiatric, predicament, they don't have a mental health disorder. Why does the brain matter to them?
Because your brain's involved in everything you do. How you think, how you feel, how you act, how you get along with other people. Your brain is the organ of intelligence, character, and every single decision that you make. And when your brain works right, you work right. And when your brain is troubled for whatever reason, mold, COVID, head trauma, not sleeping, chronic stress, when your brain's not right, you're sadder, sicker, poorer, less successful. I got to scan Tony Robbins, the famous success guru. And I love him and I love his work, and I think he's so smart. And he said publicly he had mercury poisoning. He decided he loved swordfish, but it didn't love him back because it's loaded with mercury. And when we did a Facebook Live, I'm like, you are the software of success. But if the hardware is not working, it's going to be really hard to implement the wonderful strategies that you teach. And I always think of people in 4 big circles. First week of medical school, Sid Garrett, our dean, he said, never think of patients as by their diagnosis. Always think of them in these 4 big circles. He went to the board and he drew the first circle, which was biology. And for me, it's like the physical functioning of your brain and body. And that's why the scans are so important. But then the second circle he drew was psychology. How's their mind working? How are their thoughts? Are they loaded with a term I later coined called ants, automatic negative thoughts, the thoughts that come into your mind automatically and ruin you? And also in this circle is development. And it's really the quality of your mind. And then the third circle, so if you think of the brain as the hardware of your soul, the mind is the software that needs to be programmed. So you got to get your brain healthy, program your mind, and then work on the social circle, which is, so what's going on in your life? Think pandemic. That was a social disruptor. But also, how are your relationships? How's your job? How's your money? And then the last circle that most psychiatrists would never touch is the spiritual circle. It's like, why the heck do you care? What is your deepest sense of meaning and purpose? And so I think assessing those 4 circles and working always to optimize them at the same time is critical for you being a whole, healthy person. But if your brain's not healthy because you played soccer and you had 4 concussions, doing all the therapy is not nearly as effective as getting your brain right and then doing the therapy. I mean, because I'm like a huge fan of therapy and I have my therapy patients that I love. But it's hardware, software, network connections, always understanding someone's sense of purpose.
Let's go into those 4 areas then. Just to pause on that though, you mentioned Tony Robbins there. When I was reading through your story, it became apparent that you're quite the celebrity psychiatrist, because a lot of celebrities have come out and said that they work with you. Give me a taste. Do some name dropping. Give me a couple of examples.
It's public knowledge. Bella Hadid came out and said she stopped drinking because of me. And then the newspaper tried to take my head off for that. Controversial psychiatrist gets Bella to stop drinking. Dealing with haters is something I've become quite skilled at. It's public knowledge. I've been Miley Cyrus's doctor for 11 years. I'm really proud of her. She had the #1 song in the world right now, Flowers, and it's about self-love, which makes me so happy. I'm in Justin Bieber's docuseries Seasons because I've been his doctor. I love helping them. I often say 4 of my patients have 1 billion followers. So it's about influence, because if the mission is to end mental illness by creating a revolution in brain health, well, you got to have an army. And so you might as well have an army with a lot of soldiers. And so it's a very disruptive concept, because when you really understand it, you realize we're living in a war. And I'm serious about this. Everywhere you go, someone's trying to give you bad food that will kill you early. Everywhere you go, you hear negative news that's driving depression. It's not the news. It scares you so they can sell you stuff. Everywhere you go, someone's trying to put a gadget in your hand or your pocket that will steal your dopamine and give them the mind share you should have. And the incidence of diabetes, 50% of the population is diabetic or pre-diabetic. Obesity is 72% or overweight or obese. I published 3 studies that shows your weight goes up, the size and function of your brain goes down, and people go, oh, you can't talk about that. It's like, no, you can't not talk about that. Alzheimer's is expected to triple, and depression has gone up 400% since Prozac came on the market. So obviously that didn't fix it. And so it's what my wife and I often refer to as the brain warrior's way. You want to be armed and prepared to win the fight of your life.
That's so true. I'm currently doing this glucose test as part of this company called Zoe. I had Tim Spector on the podcast, who's one of the co-founders. They do personalized nutrition. It's this incredible company based out in the UK. And so because I can see my glucose right now on my phone, when I went into a gas station the other day, or a petrol station as we say in the UK, I looked around at my options and every single thing was bad for me. Every single thing in that gas station was sugar or processed carbohydrates. The only thing I could get in that gas station was water. And I said to my partner at the time, so if you're hungry, and it's also if you're stressed or tired, you are going to eat this junk. But anyway, going back to...
Unless you plan. Unless you put stuff in your car or in your computer bag. And when you really love yourself, you take time. And like, for example, the plastic water bottles are toxic, that you just like turn them over. And does it say a 2 or 4 or 5 on the recycle? I'm like, those are pretty good. They don't leach toxins nearly as bad as 1, 3, 6, and 7. And just knowing that. See, I always say God gave us a big brain for a reason. It's like when you get motivated, this isn't hard. Brain health isn't hard. Being sick is hard. Brain health is not expensive. Being sick is expensive. You just plan a little bit better.
In terms of the hardware then, which was the first circle of your 4 circles, what can I do to make sure the hardware of my brain, what are the most important things to be cognizant of to make sure my hardware is in good shape so that I have a chance of my psychology and my connections and my spiritual circle being successful also?
So I like looking. It's like the brain is one of the only organs that doctors virtually never screen.
You've looked at a lot of brains, right?
I've looked at 230,000 brains. And I mean, I'm obsessed with, if you came to see me and you go, I'm pretty good, but I want to be great. How's my brain? And we would look at it, and is it younger than you are because you have good habits? Is it older than you are because your habits aren't so good? Or let's just say it has nothing to do with you. Your mom smoked when she was pregnant with you, or she smoked when you were a baby, and you're inhaling this secondhand smoke, which is stealing a concept I call brain reserve. So your brain health may have something to do with your habits, or may have to do with the habits of other people. So I think the first thing, it's a concept called brain envy. I often say Freud was wrong. penis envy is not the cause of anybody's problem. I've actually not seen it once in 40 years. He was focused on the wrong organ. It's the brain. And Freud, actually in 1895, said the brain science of my time is not up to the task of explaining patient symptoms, which was true in 1895. So he went off and developed psychoanalysis and had a lot of really nutty ideas, but some really great ideas. But the brain science now can explain a lot of your symptoms. So the first thing is to assess it. And this is 1991. I ordered my first scan. I started scanning everybody I know. I scanned my aunt who had a panic disorder. I scanned my mother who had a gorgeous brain, which fit her life. And then I scanned myself, and it wasn't awesome. And because I played football in high school, had meningitis when I was a young soldier, and I had bad habits. I wasn't sleeping. I ate a lot of bad food. And I was the top neuroscience student in medical school, but I didn't care about my own brain. And when I saw it, that's when I fell in love with it, wanted my mother's brain, the idea of brain envy, and I've been in love with it ever since. And one of my patients said when he saw a scan for the first time, it was like seeing one of his children, and he knew he'd never heard it again. And so that's step number one. You want a healthy brain? You got to care about it. Step two is you have to avoid things that hurt it. And you just have to sort of know the list. And step three is engage in regular brain healthy habits. Again, you just have to know the list. And the simplest way, and I love this, and I noticed throughout my books, throughout the arc of the evolution of my books, the prescriptions get easier and easier because I'm always thinking, how do I plant it so it takes root and grow? And I work with BJ Fogg. I don't know if you know Dr. Fogg from Stanford. He's in charge of the Persuasive Tech Lab. It's basically, how do people change? And he said either they have an epiphany. So when I saw my first scan, it was an epiphany. I didn't want an unhealthy brain because I understand what that means for my life. But he said most people, it's not the epiphany, it's the tiny habits. It's like, what's the smallest thing you can do today that will make the biggest difference? And it comes down to the mother tiny habit. So whenever you come to a decision point in your day, like you're at the gas station, you ask yourself this question. Takes 3 seconds. Is this good for my brain or bad for it? And if you can answer that with information and love, and this is very important, love of yourself, love of your mission, love of your work, you just start making better decisions. And whenever I say, well, you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that, it just never works. You got to tie into, I want something special for my life, and this is going to get it for me. And so if I'm at the gas station, I'm looking at the waters, and I'm like, okay, what's got a non-toxic bottle attached to it? And I'm going for the nuts because, people who have a fat-based diet, nuts and seeds, green leafy vegetables, healthy fish, healthy oils, have 42% less risk of getting Alzheimer's disease. People have a simple carbohydrate-based diet. So most of the stuff in the gas station, bread, pasta, potatoes, rice, fruit juice, and sugar, the standard American diet, have a 400% increased risk of getting Alzheimer's disease. It's a study from the Mayo Clinic. And I love that you're monitoring your blood sugar. I just love that so much because Alzheimer's disease, people refer to it often as type 3 diabetes. And one of the best things you can do for your health is make sure your fasting blood sugar is under 90. And if it tends to run high, you can go, I take metformin for that. Or you can get rid of the simple carbohydrates in your diet.
So there's two things I was really compelled by as you were speaking, in two directions I wanted to go in. The first is I want to know the list when we talk about the things that are good and bad for the brain. But just before we get on to that, you said about how you have to pause during your day when you're making decisions and ask yourself, is this good for my brain? Now, I often wonder why people know information but don't change. You talked about the persuasive tech lab. I've always wondered what the connection between someone's self-worth and their ability to do the right thing when they're in that moment of making a decision for or against them. Because it's been my observation, which is completely unproven, that people who have, and I wondered if you'd seen this in your practice, but people that have maybe a more stressed life, a lower sort of self-worth, a lower sort of self-image of themselves, tend to make short-term decisions that are less constructive or positive for the brain, but just generally in life anyway. And I wondered if there's a link there. I'm asking this question because I often wonder with some people that are close to me, with some of my friends, why they continue to make decisions that they objectively know aren't healthy. They're not good for their life, their long-term prospects of relationships, their health, whatever it might be. And it's a bit of a left field question, but is there a correlation in your view between one's self-esteem, their self-worth, their self-image, and their ability to sort of delay gratification and make the right health decisions?
So it's actually connected. Do you know about the marshmallow test?
I do, yes. I read about it.
Walter Mischel from Stanford would give children, small children, 3-4-year-old children, an opportunity to either have a marshmallow now or two a bit later. And the children who delayed gratification, their self-esteem was better. Their success virtually in every area of their life was better. Now, he later discovered you can actually train the ability to delay gratification. There's another study at Stanford. I love this study so much. They looked at 1,541 10-year-old children in 1921. It's the longest longevity study ever done. And Lewis Terman, psychologist at Stanford, evaluated them, and then he and others followed them for 90 years, looking at what goes with health, success, and longevity. And what he found was a bit shocking, that the don't worry, be happy people died the earliest from accidents and preventable illnesses. And I always wanted to be that, because I've never been the don't worry, be happy person. I show up on time. I'm driven. I'm motivated. Of all my books, they get turned in a week or two early. I'm no, conscientious. And what they found was people who are conscientious live the longest.
What's a don't worry, be happy person? How do you define
Well, it's my brother. And I love my brother, but he's 150 pounds overweight, and he leaves work at 3:00, plays golf. He just doesn't care. And for years, I tried to help him get healthy. And I even set him up with the cutest nutritionist who I trusted, and he didn't show up. And then I realized I was caring more about this than he was. And it sort of broke my heart. But it's that nonchalant attitude that's not taking things seriously. And it'll kill him early. And that breaks my heart.
Can you tell me about the journey of trying to help your brother? Because I think a lot of people listening to this have their own experience with trying to help someone that they love. And it's a often resentful, bitter, failing battle. I've been there myself.
So let me switch it to my dad.
Okay.
Because that has a better ending, at least now. I did not have a good relationship with my father. When I told my dad I wanted to be a psychiatrist, he asked me why I didn't want to be a real doctor, why I wanted to be a nut doctor and hang out with nuts all day long. And that's just hurtful. But I'd already not cared what he thought. 1972, I turn 18, I get to vote. George McGovern who's very liberal, is running against Richard Nixon. And I'm like, maybe I'll vote for McGovern. And my dad said if I did, the country would go to hell. Well, I did, and the country went to hell, but it had nothing to do with McGovern. It had to do with Nixon and Watergate and all that craziness. So we were like butting heads. When I started looking at the brain, I'm like, come on, Dad, let me scan your brain. And he said no until years later. And I'm like, Dad, what I'm learning is the brain is an organ like your heart is an organ. We got to get you healthy. And he's like, oh, great. My nut doctor son is now a health nut. He's like, what's with you and the nuts? And so for 25 years, I nudged him to get healthy. And he belittled me. He made fun of me. He would do it publicly. And it was hurtful. But his opinion of me, even though it hurt, it didn't matter. I kept doing what I do. And when he was 85, they had mold in their house. And he developed a chronic cough. And then a heart arrhythmia. And then heart failure. And I went over his house, and I saw he was depressed. And my dad didn't get depressed. My dad gave depression, but he didn't get depression. And he looked at me, and he said, Danny, I'm sick of being sick. What do you want me to do? And he's so stubborn, he did everything I asked him to do. He texts me a picture of the food. He's like, can I eat this? And I'm like, send me the ingredient list. And then I would circle it, and I'm like, in what universe is this good for you? And I'm one of 7 children. Now he starts talking about me to all of them. And they would text me and like, tell him to like not be so enthusiastic. And we started working out together. He's a beast. He could do a 6-minute plank because he's so stubborn. And over 6 months, he lost 40 pounds. His energy came back. His heart was better. He starts driving again and lived the next 5 years in love with his brain and love with his body. And if he would have died before those 5 years, I think I would have always been left with a hole in my soul. That helped repair it. And the only reason he did it is because I did it. The only reason he got healthy is because I modeled the message. And ultimately, that's what I tell my patients. You never know when they're going to turn. Like I still never know if my brother will turn. I love him. I model. I'm always there with a suggestion, right? But I'm not caring more than he cares.
What would that whole have been?
I think it's one of the big gifts that I was given, that he looked at me and said, what do you want me to do?
Is that, I'm assuming from hearing that, it's because that was the moment where he kind of accepted you and your worth and your job and your...
Yes. And he told everybody besides me how proud he was of me. Yeah. And the first time he told me he loved me was when I was 50. Which is just nuts when you think about it. I mean, he's from a different generation, and but I just can't even imagine it.
When we have someone in our lives that maybe wasn't fair to us in some way, whether it's a parent or an ex-partner or whatever, How do we not let the resentment or the negative emotions or the negative experiences or that feeling of injusticeness that like this situation wasn't fair, how do we get to a place of empathy with those people so that we can live, without the burden of that like resentment or, regret or whatever it might be?
Well, I have a perfect example. So I started imaging in 1991. I am a distinguished fellow of the American Psychiatric Association. I won a research award. I am respected by my colleagues. But I start imaging. And initially there was acceptance. And then because the imaging doesn't really go with the diagnostic orthodoxy, they're like, you shouldn't do that. And now I'm caught in a bind. I love being connected to my colleagues, but there's no way I'm not looking at your brain if I can. And so there's this tension. And for 3 or 4 years, I feel challenged, I feel belittled, I feel anxious. And I'm starting to become ostracized from my group. So I'm anxious and I'm furious. And then in 1995, my 9-year-old nephew, Andrew, attacks a little girl on the baseball field for no reason. So my brother's youngest son. And my sister-in-law calls me up and she's crying, and she said she went into his room that day and found 2 pictures he'd drawn. One of them, he's hanging from a tree in a suicide attempt, 9 years old. The other one, he's shooting other children. So he's like Columbine or Parkland, Florida, or Sandy Hook. I mean, we're into that kind of darkness. And 999 child psychiatrists out of 1,000 would have put him on medicine and put him in therapy. But because now 4 years I've been looking at the brain, we'd already correlated violence to the left temporal lobe. Left temporal lobe dysfunction often went with violence. I'm like, I want to see him. And so they drove 8 hours, and I'm sitting with my nephew, who I'm also his godfather. And I'm like, buddy, what's going on? He said, Uncle Danny, I don't know. I'm mad all the time. I said, is anybody hurting you? He said, no. I said, is anybody teasing you? He said, no. I said, is anybody touching you in places they shouldn't be touching you? He said, no. And when I held his hand while we scanned him, when the scan came up on the computer screen, he had a cyst the size of a golf ball occupying the space of his left temporal lobe. It's the first time I've seen it. I've seen it 100 times since. And when the neurosurgeon drained it, his behavior completely went back to normal. It was that moment the war began for me. It's like, if you don't look, you don't know. Stop lying about it. And I became a warrior to change psychiatry. But there's a lot of negativity with being a warrior. I was also in the Army. I was an Army psychiatrist. And what I came to realize, there's a wonderful psychologist at Virginia Commonwealth University, Worthington, who came up with a method for forgiveness. Because when you're holding on to that toxicity, it's sort of like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. And he did this method, and someone murdered his mother. And he said it even worked for him when he was dealing with the grief of losing his mother to a horrible crime. And so I can recall the hate that I've experienced. So that's the R. So recall it in detail. The E is empathize. It's like, so what are the haters feeling? You're doing something they don't know. You're doing something that's different than them. You're doing something that threatens them. See, if I'm right, and I'm right, everything in my body knows I'm right. 230,000 scans later, this isn't fake, this is real. And if you don't look, you miss all sorts of important things. But they don't know that. And if they don't know it and they're threatened, well, of course they're angry. I mean, I still hold on to they should at least come visit, right? I mean, my work is so public. The A is altruistically give them the gift of forgiveness. And I actually don't really pay attention to them because, I do what I can. We publish studies, but I don't need the negativity. So you altruistically give them the gift of forgiveness, commit to it, and hold on to it. And if you can do that for that relationship, you have more control over your happiness. Plus, if you're me, you're like, I wonder what their brain is like. And so one of the first things the scans did for me is they increased forgiveness. So I asked my dad to get scanned, 1991. My mom came because she's like, what can I do to support you? Oh, I don't want to do that. My dad, 12 years in a row. No, I don't want to do that. Why do you want me to do that? No, I don't want to do that. And then he came. And I'd never seen this in a 72-year-old person. His anterior cingulate. So we should talk a little bit about different parts of the brain, how they influence work. His anterior cingulate, it's the brain's gear shifter. It allows you to go from thought to thought, move from idea to idea, be flexible, go with the flow. And when it's busy, and he had the busiest anterior cingulate of any older person I'd ever seen, worry, hold grudges. My dad was masterful at holding grudges. Argumentative, oppositional. I used to joke that, I'm like, Dad, why is it every time I ask you for something, you say no? He goes, I don't do that. I'm like, no, you do it. Why? He's like, I don't know. It's just easier. And Tony Blair, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, said the first hallmark of a leader is his ability to say no. Well, my dad was just masterful at it. But I have to tell you, seeing that part of his brain so busy was helpful for me to forgive him, that it was a brain misfire rather than it was a soul misfire.
You talk a lot in your book about how we can reverse a lot of these things and we can change our brain, which I guess is the hopeful, optimistic side of all of this. So in the case of your father, you see that in his brain. Is there something that can be done to change it?
Absolutely. I mean, that's sort of the big, exciting message of my life, is you're not stuck with the brain you have. You can make it better, and I can prove it. I did the big NFL study when the NFL was lying that it had a problem about traumatic brain injury in football. I scanned 350 NFL players and high levels of damage. Stop lying about it. But 80% of my players get better when we put them on a rehabilitation program. And there's a story in the book about a mixed martial artist who I was giving a lecture at the clinic, and he raised his hand and he said, I just really love your work, but you're not going to like what I do. I'm like, what's that? He said, I'm a mixed martial artist. And I'm like, well, I can like you, but yeah, you're right. I'm not a fan of people bashing your head in. And I said, let's look at your scan. And it was troubled. I said, I know these supplements work because they were my NFL formula, but I don't know how fast they work. Will you come tomorrow at 8 o'clock? I'm going to give you the supplements I give my NFL players, and then I'm going to scan you 2.5 hours later. His brain was remarkably better 2.5 hours later. Now, it didn't mean it would stay that way, right? He had to stay on the program and stop doing the things that hurt his brain. But how exciting is that? To know even a couple of hours from now, if I do the right things, my brain can be better. And going back to my dad, what we found is low levels of serotonin go with high activity in the anterior cingulate. So if he would have chosen, I could have calmed it down and helped him be more flexible. Now, he chose not to do that. But I just remember my grandmother, my mom's mom, when she was 92, she went in the hospital, diverticulitis. And my mom's mom had always been mean. She's not kind. When she met my wife for the first time, she goes, "Oh, you're Danny's next victim." I'm like, "Grandma," I said, "I'm going to talk bad about you after you're dead." She had that same brain. And when I put her on medicine to increase serotonin, she became sweet, which just goes to makes you wonder how many people end up divorced because of a brain dysfunction that could be fixed. It's just given me great empathy. It's easy to call someone bad. It's harder to ask why.
In the case of your father or your grandmother, is their brain and the mood kind of disorder that you've observed in it, is that a consequence of chronic bad habits in terms of brain health, in your view?
It's always both. That whenever you give in to saying no, you make saying no more likely.
Right.
You develop these ruts in your brain, which is why behavior change is hard, because you have these ruts in your brain where it's after dinner I smoke, or it's after dinner I have ice cream, or it's first thing in the morning I have sugar cereal.
And those become like pathways.
They become ruts, like deep pathways in the brain. And I've had them for years. I mean, for a long time before I got healthy. You know, I'd go buy Jack in the Box and get a Diet Coke and get a chicken fajita pita, and it was habit. And so sometimes I'll see a Jack in the Box, like, oh. And then, of course, my supervisor comes in and like, really? And I think of it
your
like,
supervisor is in your better sense.
Well, I think of it like children. That too many people are run by the 4-year-olds in their head. Like I have 5 grandchildren, and Haven is 4. And Haven is funny and smart and sweet, but if she doesn't get her way, she totally can have a fit. And the rule in my house is if you have a tantrum to get your way, the answer is no. It's always going to be no. Go for it. And so I didn't have tantrums with the kids growing up. But too many people, the 4-year-old in their head is running the show. It's like, no, I go buy Jack in the Box. I get curly fries and a Coke. I want it, I want it, I want it, I want it. And their parent self doesn't fit your goals. You don't want it, right? You crave it. And there's a difference between craving and wanting. And it's like inhibit behavior. And that's where we haven't talked about this yet. And I knew we would on this podcast, the CEO in the brain, right? So the front third of your brain is called the prefrontal cortex. It's called the executive part of the brain. And so you talked about some of your friends who don't make good decisions, who don't wait or delay their impulses. Their frontal lobes are probably sleepy or smaller. And that'll give them huge problems in their lives. And my work, I've seen tens of thousands of people have ADD of one form or another, and it often goes with decreased activity in their frontal lobes.
Is that nature or nurture?
Nature with input from nurture. Because they did this great study in Holland where they took 300 ADD kids, put them on an elimination diet. So they basically eliminated all the crap in their diet. And 3 months later, 72% of the children did not have ADD anymore. So, but when I diagnose someone with ADD, I generally see it, coming down their mom's side or their dad's side. it generally doesn't occur in isolation. It is that strongly heritable. In fact, if I have a kid who's really ADD and I can't find it in mom or dad, I look at the kid to see if he looks like mom or dad, wondering if they got switched at birth. Just my experience.
Really?
And really, no, not kidding. And
so say that again. So if the child's brain doesn't resemble the mother or the father, you suspect that.
So I wonder
if the child's not
the
related.
child had been switched
because you're
birth.
that confident.
Because I'm that confident about the heritability of this. Now, there are other causes of ADD-like behavior, like traumatic brain injury. If the child fell down a flight of stairs and was unconscious, even for just like 15 minutes, that can damage their frontal lobes. If the child was a headbanger, that can damage their frontal lobes. And so...
Psychological trauma? I sat here with Gabor Mate.
Interesting. We're just doing a study on ACE scores. Do you know about the ACE quiz? It stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. And it was first done in combination with the CDC and Kaiser. They looked at 17,000 people. And they just gave people this simple questionnaire. And it's 10 of the most common childhood traumas. So physical, emotional, sexual abuse, having a parent with mental illness, with an addiction, incarceration, and you get scored 0 to 10. So I have a 1. My dad could really be nasty to me. So there's some of that sort of psychological abuse. But I didn't get beaten. No one sexually molested me, so on. My wife, and she wrote a book about this called The Relentless Courage of a Scared Child, has 8 out of 10. My 2 nieces, who Tana and I adopted, are both 9s. And they found if you have 4 or more, you have an increased risk of 7 of the top 10 leading causes of death. If you have 6 or more, you die 20 years earlier. Now, it's not a death sentence if you know it and you work on it, like Tana has. You have normal lifespan. But how wild is that? And so when I learned about it, I started giving it to all of our patients. And I now have 10,000 ACE scores on my patients. And we looked at their brains. And what we found is it tends to activate the medial frontal lobe, and they become hyper alert. They begin to watch what bad thing is going to happen. And I love a therapy. Have you ever heard of EMDR?
Yes, I've heard of it.
It's a psychological treatment for trauma. Stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's my favorite psychotherapy. I love doing it with patients. And when I met my wife, she's beautiful, she's smart. I mean, I fell for her. And then I'm learning about this. So one of my first gifts to her was 10 sessions of EMDR, which I know is pretty weird. But she went for 2 years. And I think it changed the trajectory of her life because she doesn't live with the past still present.
How did it help her? And what exactly does the therapy involve?
So trust, a good history. And then, so for example, if you came to see me, I would have you write down, we do a timeline of your life. I just want to know for each 5-year period, what were the great things that happened to you and what were the horrible things that happened to you? And I do that purposefully so you'll have a balanced view. If you just talk about the crap in your life, you feel like crap. And then I'd have you write down the top 10 traumas. And then it's a structured process, but I'd have you bring up the worst one. We always go for the worst first. And while you bring it up, I'll get your eyes to go back and forth, and we'll let your brain direct where you need to go. And so initially you could relive the trauma, but then it tends to dissipate. As opposed to just talking about the trauma, generally you relive it and feel like crap. The bilateral hemisphere stimulation helps it sort of just sucks the life out of it. You still remember it, but it's not haunting you anymore. You can go, yeah, that happened, but you're not sweating or you're not having nightmares. And it just takes therapy to a whole different level. It's sort of like doing mushrooms without side effects.
If I wanted to, earlier on you said you gave like 3 points, and the second point was you just got to know the list. So you said if you want to damage your brain, if you want to hurt your brain, you've got to know the list. If you want to help your brain and have a healthy brain, you've got to know the list. Going to the damaging my brain part, if I was intent on damaging my own brain, what would you advise me to do?
So in the book, I talk about a mnemonic called Bright Minds. You want to keep your brain healthy or rescue it, you have to prevent or treat the 11 major risk factors that steal your mind. So if you want to damage your brain, Bright Minds. The B is for blood flow. Low blood flow is the number one brain imaging predictor of Alzheimer's disease.
Okay.
How do you get low blood flow? Caffeine.
Oh, shit.
Nicotine, marijuana, alcohol, having a sedentary lifestyle, being overweight. The R is retirement and aging.
Can we pause on this low blood flow? You are the first person I've ever spoken to who has a comprehensive and very believable hypothesis that caffeine has a side effect. I've asked my guests over and over again because I think people refer to caffeine often as like this miracle drug that comes with no cost. But you're the first one through my research that seems to be very clear that caffeine does have a significant cost.
It's a drug. It's the most common drug. It's addictive. I mean, a little bit's fine, but more than a little bit is not fine. It increases cortisol. You don't want to increase cortisol. Puts fat around your belly. It shrinks your hippocampus. But, the reason I started really paying attention to it is on SPECT, the study I do, which is a blood flow study. It constricts blood flow 30%. I have all my patients hold caffeine the morning of their scans because I don't want it to artificially show me they have less blood flow than they really do. It fakes you out to think you have energy. What it does is it blocks adenosine, the chemical that tells you to go to sleep. And so often people rely on caffeine because they're sleep deprived, but it's just this bad cycle. And so many of my patients stop, and uniformly they tell me they feel better. They said their energy is better.
You talk about one particular patient in the book who was struggling with a variety of difficulties. I think it was like brain fog and memory issues and so on. And one of the things you advised him to do was to cut coffee.
Jeff, yeah.
Jeff.
I remember Jeff. He was a pilot, and I live on caffeine. And I'm like, you got to get rid of it because his brain looked terrible.
His brain looked terrible?
His brain looked terrible. And he's like, no. And he's like, all right, I'm going to do it. And so he didn't get headaches. We cut it down by 5% a day. So 3 weeks it was gone. He didn't have any withdrawal, didn't have any headaches. And he's like texting me, unbelievable energy, unbelievable clarity. And it's a drug. And why, I want to teach my patients skills. I don't want them to just take pills. And caffeine's a drug.
Do you drink caffeine?
A little bit, not much.
How much was Jeff having?
Jeff was having about 600 milligrams a day.
Jesus.
Which is 2 venti Starbucks. One venti Starbucks is 330 milligrams of caffeine. And, we've supersized everything in this country. I don't know if they do that in the UK, but we certainly do it here. And it's not a good strategy.
And so long-term restriction of blood flow to the brain through these things you've described, caffeine, marijuana, all of these things, has a detrimental impact on the development of the brain. Pretty straightforward. I get that. So that's the B.
R is retirement and aging. You want to prematurely age your brain? Drop out of school. Do not engage in new learning. I mean, you doing this podcast, you're always learning new things, which is great for you. But the lack of, when you learn something new, your brain makes a new connection. When you stop learning or you start doing the same thing over and over again, your brain starts to disconnect itself. Being in a job that does not require new learning is a risk factor for dementia. Being lonely is a risk factor for dementia. So be an ass, and you're more likely to hurt your brain. At my workplace, we have the no asshole rule. So there's a book by a Stanford professor called The No Asshole Rule. Love that book. And the no asshole rule as a CEO starts with me. So I don't get to be one, but I'm not tolerating anybody who has asshole behavior at work. And if you're not an asshole, you're less likely to be lonely. And loneliness is terrible for brain function. If you want to prematurely age your brain, eat a lot of red meat as if your iron and ferritin levels are high, because ferritin, which is stored iron, tends to age the brain. The I is inflammation. If you want to increase inflammation, which is a root cause of so many medical and mental health issues, never floss. Don't really care about your teeth. So you want to love your brain, you have to love your mouth. It's absolutely critical for you not to have gum disease. Because if you have gingivitis, odds are you're at increased risk for heart disease and depression and dementia. It's fascinating. Like, I didn't learn about this, and I didn't really care about my teeth until I started seeing the links between gum disease and heart disease, gum disease and brain disease. And now I'm a flossing fool. But if you want to damage your brain, don't care about your mouth, about your teeth. Don't ever eat fish. People who have grilled or baked fish once a week have more gray matter in their brain. People who have low levels of omega-3 fatty acids have smaller brains. And if you want to damage your brain, eat the standard American diet. So processed food, like eat most of your calories from the gas station. Ugh. And from the fast food restaurants nearby. And they spend billions on getting those foods to the perfect crunchiness, the perfect meltiness, the perfect aroma, because they hire neuroscientists to addict your brain. Be suspicious. The G is genetics. You want to damage your brain? Blame everything on your genes. Like, I have obesity and heart disease in my family, but I'm not overweight. And I don't have heart disease. Why? I'm on an obesity, heart disease prevention program every day of my life. Because genes load the gun. It's what happens to us and what we choose to do that pulls the trigger. So I adopted my nieces because their parents couldn't stop using drugs. And I'm like adamant. If you want my help, you have to cooperate. There's no vaping. There's no drug use. There's no alcohol. And it's working. I taught them a new word last week, scromiting. Have you heard of scromiting?
I haven't.
It's a combination of screaming and vomiting. And because of the legalization of marijuana and the increased use, teenagers are getting this. And in record numbers, they're in emergency rooms screaming and vomiting. It's called scrumming. So, genes load the gun, but know your risk and be on that prevention program. I mean, that's just a sign of intelligent life. The H is head trauma. You want to damage your brain? Play football, play soccer, play rugby, and box. And text while you're walking in LA. I mean, you're just more likely to have a brain injury.
Because you fall over, just because, in case that wasn't clear, people are going to think texting is bad for the brain.
The T is toxins. So, see alcohol as a health food. It's total crap. See marijuana as innocuous. It's total crap. I mean, I'm happy they legalized it. Please don't put people who use marijuana in jail. It's a really bad use of resources, really stupid. But let's not say it's good for us, because teenagers who use have an increased risk of anxiety, depression, suicide, and psychosis. That's not okay. The brain undergoes wild development, and people sort of don't get this. They think little kids, their brain is undergoing wild development. But from the time you're 15 to 25, it's going through wild construction. In fact, that's when the highways are being myelinated. Have you ever heard of myelin? Myelin is a white fatty substance that gets wrapped on your neurons. And when a neuron or a brain cell becomes myelated, it becomes 10 to 100 times faster. It's more efficient. And when a baby's born, there's very little myelin in the cortex laid down. When they're about 2 months old, their occipital lobes, their visual cortex becomes myelinated. And when you smile at them, they smile back because they can really see you. Well, slowly, myelination goes from the back all the way to the front, but it doesn't get to the front until you're about 25. So this masterpiece building, if you will, is under construction until you're 25. So many teenagers, it's the crappy food. It's just like throwing poison into the construction zone. Marijuana is innocuous. We're going to the parties and getting drunk, and they're damaging the building. And yes, there are ways to repair it, but what idiot would damage the most beautiful building in the neighborhood? And I often say to my teenage patients, I said, hey, if you had $1 million racehorse, would you ever feed it junk food? Would you ever get it stoned? Would you ever get it drunk? And the smart ones would go, only if you were an idiot. But aren't you worth so much more? And we have a high school course called Brain Thrive by 25. We studied it in 16 schools. Decreases drug, alcohol, and tobacco use, decreases depression, and improves self-esteem. And one of the weeks is things to avoid to have a healthy brain. And at the end of the lecture, it's a boy, never a girl. That's really irritating. Raises his hand and goes, how can you have any fun? And we play a game with them called Who Has More Fun? The person with the good brain or the person with the bad brain? Who gets the girl and gets to keep her because he's not an ass? The person with the good brain or the person with the bad brain? Who gets into the college they want to get into? Who has the best life? And ultimately, it's the person with the good brain. So we're at T, and you want to damage your brain, undergo general anesthesia for plastic surgery over and over again. General anesthesia is bad for the brain. Never read the ingredients on your personal product labels, because you know there's an epidemic of low testosterone in young males.
Crazy. I was reading the stats the other day. What is it?
It's because we're poisoning them.
Is that why?
That's why.
What is the headline stat there regarding testosterone in men? It's decreasing, isn't it, year over year?
Year over year, and more than half have either low normal or low levels. I've never seen anything like it. I've been measuring testosterone levels in my patients forever, and we're poisoning them. There's an app I like called Think Dirty. It's not what you think it is. It allows you to scan your personal products, and it tells you on a scale of 1 to 10 how quickly they're killing you. So, for example, I've shaved with Barbasol for 50 years. And when I learned this a decade ago, I scanned it. 1 is good, 10 is kill you early. It was a 9. And I was horrified because the parabens and phthalates are known hormone disruptors. So now I shave with something called Kiss My Face. It's a 2, lasts longer than Barbasol. And I do that because I love myself. I mean, why would I poison myself unless I was not that smart? And so just start reading the labels of your toothpaste, of your deodorant, of your shampoo, of your body wash, of your makeup.
And what am I looking for? Because if I read the labels of my toothpaste, I mean, I wouldn't know if it was good or bad.
So you can scan
it with the app.
Or EWG, the Environmental Working Group, has an app similar to that. You just educate yourself because it's not just about you. It's about generations of you, because the health of your body matters when it comes to what babies you may make.
Okay.
M is mental health. Believe every stupid thing you think. Be masterful. You want to damage your brain? Be masterful at predicting the worst and then making it worse.
How does that have a bad impact on the brain?
Negativity increases stress. Plus, negativity drops activity in your cerebellum. So we talked a little bit about the CEO, the prefrontal cortex. Well, it's intimately connected to the processing part of your brain, your cerebellum. It's about 10% of the brain's volume, but has half the brain's neurons. And negativity tends to deactivate it. So it actually makes you more confused. So if you think of an athletic slump, they're focused on, I'm going to miss. And of course, they miss. The second I is immunity and infections. So much to talk about with the pandemic. But people who have low vitamin D levels are much more likely to die from COVID. They're actually much more likely to die from virtually anything. Low vitamin D, which occurs in about 60% of the population, is associated virtually with every bad thing, including a smaller brain. So if you want to have a smaller brain, never go in the sun, never test your vitamin D level, and never take a supplement. Brand new study out just last week. People who take a vitamin D supplement have 40% decreased risk of getting Alzheimer's disease.
How do they establish?
How simple is that?
How do they establish like causation in these studies where one would also assume that people that take vitamin D supplements have a general...
So this was a prospective study where they gave half the group vitamin D and then they followed them. It was a fascinating study. But there are tens of thousands of studies on vitamin D and its impact. And the darker your skin, the more sun you need. So an interesting study from the Bahamas, they looked at people who were raised in the Bahamas who then migrated to the United Kingdom. So healthy vitamin D to no vitamin D because of the weather.
Botswana to
So
England.
from Botswana, and the incidence of psychosis went up.
Interesting.
So, and how simple is it? It's a blood test. Get your vitamin D measured. Everybody listening to this, you should know it, like you know your BMI, like you know your blood pressure, and optimize it. Either get in the sun more if you can, or take vitamin D3 with vitamin K2. I mean, it's super simple. And I mean, it's like, that's easy. That's something you can do right away. if I wanted to mess up my immunity, I would encourage myself to have leaky gut. So I'd encourage myself to damage the lining of my gut with antibiotics and alcohol and pesticide-laden foods, and I wouldn't eat any fiber. So I would really lean into the standard American diet.
Going back to your point about environmental toxins, I've always wondered if it was like pseudoscience that cosmetic products we have in our house are having an impact on our hormone levels. You were talking about hormone levels there. My partner has always said to me things like, be careful with what's in that toothpaste, Steve, or she'll look at products that I have and go, nope, or yes. I'm like, where's the science? We talked about testosterone and
the science is huge. There's a wonderful book. So if you ever, if you want to get rid of the doubt, it's called The Toxin Solution by Joe Pizzorno, who started Bastyr University. He's one of the most well-respected naturopaths in the world. Now, if you want a shortened version, read my book, The End of Mental Illness, because there's a whole section on toxins with about 100 scientific references. So you don't want toxins. And you don't want to think it's pseudoscience unless you've actually gone to PubMed.gov and studied it. So many people have called my work pseudoscience, and I'm like, go to PubMed.gov today, you'll see I've published 80 studies, and oh, by the way, there are 15,000 studies on SPECT. So, I'm a fan of your sweetheart.
Yeah, she always seems to be right about everything. I'm pessimistic on my way in, and then God, this doesn't sound so great, but what she says registers, and then I speak to an expert, and they go, "Your girlfriend is right." That is the story of my life. So she's just a little bit, and I'll say to her, I'll leave this podcast now, and I'll go. She's actually sat over there. I'll go and say, "Oh, by the way, I spoke to him, and he said the stuff you said about all the cosmetic products I use is right." And she won't catch. She'll go, "Yeah, I know." It happens literally every week, like 3 or 4 times a week. One of the things I read in terms of the impact of cosmetics on our hormone levels was that over the last 20 years, our testosterone levels have declined by about 50% on average, which is absolutely terrifying.
Terrifying.
I have a lot of friends who are I have a staggering amount of friends and people that I know that are in sexless relationships and are struggling with sex and other hormone related issues. I've got a friend that is had a challenge with, is it POS?
PCOS.
PCOS.
Polycystic ovarian syndrome.
And I just have a suspicion that it's not nature that's causing some of these issues. So when I hear about how the cosmetic products we have in our life are influencing our hormone levels, I go, maybe this is the guy that's stitching us all
It's
up.
worth making sure someone does an ultrasound on our ovaries to see if that's in fact the case. But I have a funny story on PCOS. When I first met my wife, she wouldn't attach. It was more like she was the guy, and we'd make love and I want to cuddle, and she's like, okay, done. And I couldn't, I loved her, and she'd come and she'd go, and she's like, just make me crazy. And then I took her to our first fight was on the dog we were going to get. So I wanted like a King Charles Cavalier. I wanted like a lap dog, something cute, something I could just have fun with. And she wanted a Mastiff, or she wanted some killer dog. And no, it's just not me. And so we got into a fight about that. Anyways, I get her to see a hormone specialist, and she diagnoses her with PCOS. And it just made such sense. And what she did is an ultrasound of our ovaries. They were like loaded with these little cysts. And she treated the PCOS. And so PCOS, women's testosterone levels tend to be higher, and their blood sugar tends to be higher, and they have more problems committing. So she fixes it. And then Tana becomes like committed. I love this. But then she calls me at work one day and she said, I found this pocket poodle in Northern California that's like 2 pounds. And I'm like, who are you? It's like, change your hormones, change your dog.
Do you recommend that we check our hormone levels frequently?
Every year.
Every year?
Every year. DHEA, testosterone, thyroid, estrogen and progesterone for women every year. Because for women, their progesterone drops about 10 years before they go into menopause. Progesterone's the natural anti-anxiety hormone. And when it drops, all of a sudden a woman's 40 and she can't sleep. And she's more anxious and she's more irritable. And it's causing relationship problems. And she goes to the doctor and gets a prescription for Ambien, for Xanax, and for Lexapro. And oh, by the way, she's drinking more or using more marijuana. And she doesn't know why. And it's easier to replace the progesterone than to deal with all those other strategies that help you feel better now, but not later.
Is that what they call perimenopause?
It's earlier than that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, perimenopause is sort of, for most women, in like late 40s. Hormones are so important. And if your hormones aren't right, your brain isn't right. One of the things I talk about in the book is that women have a higher incidence of Alzheimer's disease. Now, part because they live longer than men because they make better decisions. But a man's brain is used to not having estrogen, right? It's been raised primarily on testosterone. A woman's brain is used to having estrogen. So when she goes through menopause and doesn't have estrogen, blood flow in her brain drops, and it puts her at greater risk for things like dementia. And so I'm a big believer in, the reason your hormones drop with age, it's the planet's way of eliminating you. And I'm not okay with that. I want to stick around as long as I can. And so hormone replacement can be super helpful for people who need it.
As you might know, the show's now sponsored by Airbnb. Absolutely love Airbnb. Always have. Always been saved my life on so many occasions. And my team, when we first got in touch with Airbnb, were talking about how most people don't realize that their place where they currently live could become an Airbnb. And I guess the second question there is, how much could your place be worth? And it turns out you could be sitting on an Airbnb goldmine without even knowing it. Some people Airbnb their entire homes when they're away. That's what I did in New York. Whenever I left New York, my place was on Airbnb and people rented it out, sometimes for a day, sometimes for 2 days, sometimes for a week. And it's a great way to cover some of the bills while you're away. So whether you're looking to go on holiday or you just want some extra cash for bills, or you want to buy something nice for a Valentine that you love, whatever it might be, head over to airbnb.co.uk/host and you can find out how much your current property where you live can earn while you're not there. I suspect it might blow your mind because it certainly blew mine. When I was researching you, I read that you've dealt with patients who have chronic difficulty with sleep several times in your career. I've got a lot of friends that I always talk about. I've got a lot of friends that have struggled with sleep. Often difficult to know what to say to them to give them advice. What would you recommend in terms of improving sleep? And I was quite curious because I read about your hypnosis and hypnotherapy treatment, which seemed to be quite effective in helping people that were struggling with sleep. But what would you say to someone that struggled with sleep?
It's 3 things. Sleep envy, gotta care about it. Avoid things that hurt your sleep and do things that promote it. So what hurts sleep? And most people know caffeine can, if you have it in the morning, it's still in your body at night. And so know how you metabolize it. If you're having trouble sleeping, I'd kill it and just see if it has a positive impact. A warm room impairs sleep. A noisy room, a room with light, they all impair sleep. Blue light. So having blue light in your eyes after dark impairs melatonin production.
What about glucose increases in food?
I'm sorry?
If I eat before bed,
You become a non-dipper, which is so interesting, that if you don't eat 3 hours before you go to sleep, right at sleep, your blood pressure will drop as you go to sleep. If you eat right before bed, your blood pressure won't dip, won't drop, which puts you at a higher risk for heart attack and stroke because it's putting more pressure on your blood vessels. And trust me, you don't want a heart attack and you don't want a stroke. So whatever you can do to keep your blood pressure healthy, and that's sort of a simple thing. People who eat before bed generally have the habit of doing it, which is why I'm a huge fan of intermittent fasting. Because, if you have dinner at 6, you won't eat again until 10 in the next morning. But what that really means is you won't be eating right before bed. And then things to help sleep. We talked about what not to do, what to do. Every night when I go to bed, I think rituals are wonderful. So I say a prayer, and then I go, what went well today? And I've been doing this for a decade. And it's a treasure hunt now. I'm like on a mission to find what I liked about my day. And so I start in the morning when I woke up, and I just go hour by hour looking for what I liked about the day. And usually by early afternoon, I'm asleep, as I'm going through my timeline. But I'm busy. And so often awesome things will happen and I just sort of gloss over them. So it's a time to consolidate. That's what sleep does, consolidates memories. But now I'm focused on positive things which set my dreams up to be more positive. And people who do that for just 3 weeks increase their level of happiness. How simple is that?
it's amazing. You wrote a book about the subject of happiness in 2020. It's called You, Happier, the 7 Neuroscience Secrets of Feeling Good Based on Your Brain Type. Now, the concept of having a brain type I find really compelling. You talk about it in this book as well. The idea that we have different brain types. Why does it matter to know what brain type I have? And what are the brain types?
There's 16. There's 5 primary types.
Right.
Balanced, spontaneous,
Yeah.
persistent, sensitive, and cautious. Why do you want to know? Because they're going to tell you where you're going to suffer. And if you know your type and the type of your parent, of your partner, or the type of your children, you'll actually be able to work on happiness in the relationship better. And so, for example, the balanced person really has a pretty healthy brain and they tend to be pretty even. And they just basically need basic foundational support.
We all know that person.
I'm sorry?
I know a lot of those people that have a seemingly balanced brain.
Yeah. And then there are the spontaneous people. You probably know a lot of them as well. They are spontaneous. They're creative. They're out of the box thinkers. They also tend to be impulsive, easily distracted, disorganized. They tend to be late. And they love novelty. And they love surprises.
Entrepreneurs?
They're often entrepreneurs. And they often marry the persistent type.
Which is type 3.
Which is type 3, which they're like a dog with a bone. They stay with stuff. They're on time. They hate surprises. They like ritual. They like routine. It's safe for them. And so throw them a surprise party and they'll be unhappy. It won't be joyful for them. It will be stressful for them. The pandemic was really hard on the spontaneous people because they're often extroverts, where the persistent people tend more to be introverts. And they sort of liked not having to deal with a lot of other unpredictable people.
In that way, is the phrase that opposites attract quite true? Because
Yes.
someone that's a bit spontaneous and maybe an entertainer, an entrepreneur, goes for someone who's a bit more controlled and rigid and likes a schedule. You see it in relationships. You see one partner that's typically doesn't care about planning the holiday, and the other person who's done the itinerary perfectly, and they make for a good team.
They do initially. And then they fight.
Oh.
Because the persistent person can hold grudges. The spontaneous person can say things that hurt their feelings, and they end up seeing me. In fact, I did a study called the Couples from Hell study, where I scanned 500 couples who failed marital therapy but still wanted to be together. And 80% of them, the scan showed one or both of them needed a tune-up in their brain. And my first case, which I still remember, Gary and Judy, and I initially hated them because I knew I wasn't going to help them. They brought their kids to me. One kid got better, the other one didn't. I saw the other kid and I realized he's not getting better because mom and dad hate each other. So I'm like, I want to see you guys in marital therapy. And they said, Dr. Amen, we really like you. We don't do well in marital therapy. We tried 4 times and it always makes us worse. And in my head, this was my own grandiose thinking. I'm like, well, maybe they just hadn't seen anybody really good. So I saw them, and on their first visit, they sat on the opposite end of each couch. It's a bad sign in marital therapy. And after about 3 months, I know I'm not going to help them. She has a PhD in grudge holding, and he's always late. He says awful, impulsive, stupid things. And I'm like, at the end of 6 months, I start getting physical stress symptoms because I hate being ineffective. I hate that. And 9 months, I'm in my shower getting ready to come to work, and I realize they're on my schedule, and my stomach starts to hurt. I'm like, today I'm going to tell them to get divorced because it's not good for children to be in a home of chronic conflict. But I grew up Roman Catholic, and the idea of divorce, especially 30 years ago, was awful. And the Catholic voice visited me and said, oh, great, because you're not a good enough therapist, they're going to get divorced and go to hell. I looked at the water faucet and went, how much therapy does this take to get over? And I got out of the shower, called my friend who owned the imaging center. I said, hey, Jack, will you give me 2 scans for the price of 1? And he's like, why? I said, Jack, I have this couple and they're not getting better and it's making me crazy. I want to see their brain. And he's like, we could start a business and call it brainmatch.com. Anyways, they got scanned. Her frontal lobes work way too hard, just like my dad. He had sleepy frontal lobes. And I'm like, how'd you miss this? He has ADD. She has OCD tendencies. I put him on Ritalin. I put her on Prozac. I just read an article, if you believe in random chance, the night before, that Prozac calms down the cingulate gyrus. And they were fascinated and engaged by the brain because they knew it wasn't working. They took the medicine. I told them I didn't want to see them for a month because I was tired and I wanted them to have medicine to work. When they came back, they sat on the same couch. He had his hand on her leg. That's a good sign in marital therapy. And 33 years later, they're still married.
Wow.
And they don't see therapists because they learned what they needed to learn, like responsibility and empathy and listening and assertiveness and noticing what you like more than what you don't like, grace and forgiveness. They learned it, and their brains could process it, right? Go back to hardware, fix the hardware. The software is more likely to take it.
I read that you had a divorce at age 47, and you made a remark that you wouldn't get married again unless you got to scan your partner's brain.
It's absolutely true. There's no way I would marry someone unless I saw their brain. It was more important than seeing them naked. And I met Tana January 1st, 2006. And her first scan was January 24th.
You scanned her the same month.
I scanned her. I liked her. I liked her a lot. And she's a neurosurgical ICU nurse, so we sort of bonded over the brain a little bit. But she said it was one of the best lines, that I want to see your naked brain. So I don't think I actually phrased it like that, but that's the story she tells.
Is there a really clear correlation between when you're thinking, if you were to be a matchmaker professionally, you know, if you pivoted to the matchmaking industry, you talked about the 5 types of brain. What types of brain would you try and pair together? Because if type 2, the spontaneous, doesn't work with the persistent because they end up arguing, is there a pairing sequence that results in an optimal marriage or relationship retention?
So balanced brains tend to do really well.
They do, don't they?
With balanced brains.
The guy I was thinking about.
Spontaneous brains, they need someone that just keeps their dopamine flowing because they have lower dopamine levels. So often getting their ADD treated, that will help get them on a ketogenic diet, which helps steady their dopamine levels. That can be helpful.
I think I'm a spontaneous.
I'm sorry?
I think I'm a spontaneous.
We'll see. The persistent types tend to struggle because it's the my way or the highway part. The cautious, persistent types tend to do really well because they're anxious enough that they're thinking about other people's feelings.
I think we missed. So we got to 3, didn't we? We got to number 3, which was the persistent.
Right.
Number 4 is sensitive. So
they're deeply empathic, often insightful, intuitive, and can be empaths, but they tend to be prone to depression. And so they have a lot of ants running around, unless they discipline them. They make great therapists.
Do they have high levels of stress?
No, that's the cautious type.
Which is number 5.
5, yeah. They are loaded with the fortune-telling ant. They often will get involved with these conspiracy theories. Unfortunately, some of the conspiracy theories tended to be true. That's really hard. Like, I'm a psychiatrist for 40 years, and someone comes in my office and goes, the NSA is listening to my phone. And, I'm thinking, schizophrenia, do I need drugs? And it's like, no, the NSA is listening to their phone calls. So it's been an interesting time for a psychiatrist. But it's the predicting the worst. And I tell my patients, the only people who should really predict the worst are contract lawyers. I mean, they should protect you from what bad things are going to happen. Other than that, you want to predict what's going to go right.
So if I am a spontaneous, which of those 5 brain types, the balanced, the spontaneous, the persistent, the sensitive, the cautious, should I marry?
Balanced.
Okay.
Now, if you're a CEO, you want a persistent, cautious type. So I think that's type 11, to manage you. This is a really important point. If you are a business leader and you tend to be spontaneous, do not have a spontaneous assistant because it'll stress you out and stuff won't get done and the IRS will come knock on your door because you're not going to be filling out the paperwork right. It's really important. You need to know your strengths, know your vulnerabilities, and hire to cover your vulnerabilities. Too many spontaneous people hire people they like that are like them, which leads to stress and chaos.
That's very true. In all of my businesses, I've always found managing directors who are calmer, more organized, more risk-aware individuals, and it's always worked really well because I tend to be very very prone to taking risks, and my default position, which I've had to learn, so I've had to sort of become self-aware and counteract it, is to pursue multiple things at once. So I have to have this ongoing conversation with my brain to say, focus, Your better self, your wisdom knows that focus is your biggest pitfall. So, well, a lack of focus is your biggest pitfall. And I guess that kind of brings me to another point, which was this idea you touched on earlier on about disassociating from your brain, i.e. giving your brain a name, as you call it in your book, so that you can have a conversation with it. That sounds like a funny thing to do. If I call my brain, I'm going to give my brain a name. My brain is now called, I'm going to call it Daniel. So there's Stephen, who is me, and there's Daniel, who is me. But Daniel is my brain and I am Stephen. And what is the upside in creating the separation?
Psychological distance from the noise in your head. So you don't attach to it. So if it's Daniel, then you can accept what he says or you can reject it.
Okay.
So when I first heard about this from Stephen Hayes, I'm like, what would I give him a name? And I named myself after my pet raccoon when I was 16. And like my mind, Hermie was a shit stirrer. She TP'd my mother's bathroom. She ate all the fish out of my sister's aquarium. She'd leave raccoon poo in my shoes. I loved her. I loved me. But my mind is a troublemaker. It'll like conjure up all sorts of negative scenarios. So if I separate from it, I can put Hermie metaphorically in her cage. And now what I do, because I love her, is I'll put her on her back and I'll tickle her or I'll cuddle her. I'm like, it's going to be all right. You don't have to believe every stupid thing you think. Yes, we are going to die, but we're not going to die today. You know, when you can live in the presence by managing your thoughts, by not attaching to them, by separating from them, that's where peace lives. That's where happiness lives, when you can sort of step outside and just go, you know, I'm not my thoughts. My thoughts might come from my dad's generation, may have been some of his trauma, or it might come from the voice of my mom and dad growing up, or the voice of the priest, or my siblings, or the music I listen to, you know. And just because you have a thought has nothing to do with whether or not it's true or whether or not it's helpful. The brain is a sneaky organ. We all have weird, crazy, stupid, sexual, violent thoughts that nobody should ever hear. I tell my patients this all the time. One of my patients goes, oh, I had an indecent thought about my teenage daughter's friend. I'm a pedophile. And I'm like, that's a big leap. Did you like climb in bed with her? Did you make plans to talk? He says, no, none of that. I'm like, dude, you're not a pedophile. It's just your brain playing tricks on you. Just because you have that thought, well, a whole bunch of people have that thought, but they don't do anything about the thought. But people don't understand that thoughts are just creations of neuronal function, and your frontal lobe should evaluate. This is a helpful thought. I should pursue this thought. Stay away from this thought. This thought doesn't fit my goals.
If I am a spontaneous brain type, then, is there anything I can do without drugs to become a balanced brain type?
So, first thing, one-page miracle. Write it out. It's an exercise in the book. What do you want? Just like as a CEO of a company, you have a business plan and you have quarterly goals. Write it out. What do you want in your relationships, in your work, in your money, in your physical, emotional, spiritual health?
Why write it down?
Because you're telling your brain what you want. And then every day you sort of know what it is. I mean, you memorize that thing. And then each decision you make, you ask yourself, does it fit? Does my behavior fit the goals I have for my life? And so what you're doing is you're activating your prefrontal cortex. So the part of your brain that if you really are spontaneous, that's the sleepy part of your brain. So the first thing is intention. Have a business plan, or have a plan for your life. The second thing, you have to make sleep a priority, because if you tend to be spontaneous, that goes way up when you haven't slept. That also goes way up when your blood sugar is low. So it's not just high blood sugar is the problem. It's often low blood sugar is the problem. One of my celebrities who kept getting arrested and trouble, I did a fasting blood sugar on him, was 49. It was way too low. He had hypoglycemia, and when I got him to eat 4 or 5 times a day, he never got arrested again. So make sure your diet's right, and my spontaneous people tend to do really well on ketogenic diets or low, simple carbohydrate diets. Now, that diet will make the persistent type crazy, because that's a focused diet where if you put someone who can't stop thinking on a focused diet, they think more on the things that bother them. So the diet really depends on the type, which I talk about in the book. Exercise, intense aerobic exercise, boosts dopamine. And there's some simple supplements like L-tyrosine. Or I make something called Focus and Energy that's got ashwagandha, ginseng, rhodiola, and choline, things that help you focus but don't amp you.
Okay, Daniel. So we have a new tradition on this podcast. At the end of the Diary of a CEO episodes, we ask all of our guests to write a question and to put it into the book, The Diary of a CEO. So you will be asked to do the same just before you leave. But recently what we've done, because we understand that these conversations foster a sense of connection in people because they're a little bit more vulnerable than your usual conversations, and we believe that that's the door to connection, is we've turned some of the questions in this book into cards that people can play at home. This is a brand new thing we've done. So on here, these are various cards that have been written by previous guests on the show. If you scan the QR code on the back, it takes you to a video of the person who answered it, so the person that came after them. And then on the front, you can see the question they've asked with their name on it. I'm going to lay these cards in front of you. I want you to just pick one at random. I've just selected some for you out of the full, almost, I think there's about 70 or odd questions in here. I've picked 10. So just pick one at random and I'll ask you to answer the question that you pick. Is that okay?
Sure.
You're up for it? Cool. Who's gone for the first one?
What is one mistake that you have made that you have been scared to address or reconcile? And you want me to answer that question? What is one mistake that I've made that I have been scared to address or reconcile? That I don't like firing people. That it's really hard. And I came to realize if I don't do it, I should fire myself. But that's the one thing. It's like, why did I hold on to that for so long? It's that when you have the no asshole rule, firing people's really harder. Mm-hmm. But yet I've come to realize that it's an essential skill to prune. Because if you're a CEO, you're like a gardener. But it taps into something about me being bad that I don't like.
What brain type have you got?
I'm a balanced type. And my vulnerabilities, because we all have wings, or vulnerabilities, persistent and cautious.
Okay. Can I ask you to pick one more card?
Who is the person you'd most like to say sorry to, but haven't? And I've thought about this. My dad died 3 years ago. And I was so mad at him and would be pretty vocal about how mad I was of him. But when you focus that, you don't see all the good things that happened. I had said that my ACE score was 1 and my wife's an 8. He provided a level of stability that I didn't appreciate. And so he knew the last 5 years that I loved him, and we spent a lot of time together. But I think I would apologize to him for holding on to the negativity.
And that's exactly why we created these cards. If you want to get your own conversation cards, go to theconversationcards.com. That is theconversationcards.com. And I hope everybody everywhere gets their hands on them. I think the world would be a better place if we're all a little bit more vulnerable with each other, because that very much is the door to connection. Back to the episode. Okay, so the question that's been left for you in the diary from our previous guest is, what topic is no one talking about now that historians will study in the future?
Well, from my perspective, it's the insanity of the mental health industry that is destroying the mental health of America, making diagnoses based on symptom clusters with no biological data, then drugging people. Last year, there were 337 million prescriptions for antidepressants. 27% of all doctor visits, no matter the specialty, 27% someone's leaving with a prescription for a benzodiazepine like Xanax or Valium. This is an insane time. And they call me crazy, and I'm not crazy. They're going to be talking about this dark period in psychiatry for centuries to come.
Jesus. Daniel, thank you. For me, this is very much the culmination of so much work you've done over a series of books and your life's work. So I would recommend everybody, if they have the opportunity to go and get it right now. It is out. And it's one of those real pivotal books that sort of turns the lights onto something to a room that I didn't even know existed, which is my brain. And the brain is obviously the computer. It's the driving force, as you said at the start of this conversation, of all the decisions I get right and wrong. And it's my duty to do everything that I can to love my brain. And that's exactly what your book leaves me with as a parting message, is it's this message of loving my brain and doing everything I can to treat it as if with the respect and love that it deserves. Thank you for all of your work. Thank you for the inspiration you've given me. And thank you for the way that your work has nudged my life and the trajectory of my life. And therefore, as you say, the trajectory of those that come after me's life in a little bit more positive, healthy direction, because that is not nothing. That is significant, especially as you zoom out. So thank you so much, Daniel. It's a joy to speak to you.
Well, thank you so much for such a wonderful interview, for being prepared to help me actually go inside myself and see how these dots connect, and helping me spread the word. I am trying to create a revolution, and I need people to help. So thank you. Thank you for helping me do this.
I've now been a Huel drinker for about 4 years, roughly. So much so that I ended up investing in the company, and I play a role on the board of the company, but they also very kindly sponsored this podcast. And to be honest, I've never said this before, but Huel believed in this podcast before anybody else. The CEO, Julian, told me before we even launched the podcast how successful it would be and that Huel would back it. And I absolutely have a huge amount of gratitude for them for that support, but an even greater sense of gratitude for the fact that they've helped me stay nutritionally complete throughout the chaos and hecticness of my tremendously busy business schedule. So if you haven't tried out Huel, which I hope most of you have at least given it a go by now, try it out. It's an unbelievable way to try and stay nutritionally on course if you have a hectic, busy schedule. And let me know what you think. Send me a tweet and a DM, tag me. Let me know what you think. Quick one. As you guys know, we're lucky enough to have Blue Jeans as a sponsor and supporter of this podcast. For anyone that doesn't know, Blue Jeans is an online video conferencing tool that allows you to have slick, fast, good quality online meetings without any of those glitches that you'd normally find with other meeting online providers. You know the ones I'm talking about. And they have a new feature called Blue Jeans Basic, which I wanted to tell you about. Blue Jeans Basic is essentially a free version of their top quality video conferencing. And that means that you get immersive video experiences. You get that super high quality, super easy and zero fuss experience. And apart from 0 time limits on meetings and calls, it also comes with high fidelity audio and video, including Dolby Voice. They also have expertise grade security, so you can collaborate with confidence. It's so smooth that it's quite literally changed the game for myself and my team without compromising quality at all. So if you'd like to check them out, search bluejeans.com and let me know how you get on. DM me, tweet me, whatever works for you. Let me know how you find it.
I'm legally really not meant to comment on the Tinder times. I don't even know if I've told this story. But
Whitney Wolfe Herd, the CEO and founder of Bumble. Whitney became one of the few women who can add billionaire to her title.
The dating app that puts women in charge of making the first move.
making the first move can change your life, but you have to do it. No one can do it for you, which would then become Bumble's entire mantra.
I've seen all the things that Bumble have done over the years, and it always seems to be original in its nature.
It was a lot of these tiny hacking concepts that made no sense. No one had ever done these things before, but if you understand what moves and motivates people, then you have this opportunity to connect with them. And so that's been a superpower of ours over the years.
At 31 years old, you're the youngest woman to take a company public.
What's the personal toll on you in those moments?
It's been pretty dark. It's been pretty heavy.
Your departure from Tinder read to me like it was horrific and sexist.
It was soul-crushing. I was being described in all sorts of ways. I had reporters trying to go through my window, and it was really violating. There's a whole persona that's been created about me out there in the world. How am I ever going to escape this? I was 24 years old.
If I asked your teams, what's Whitney like as a leader, what would they say to me?
I don't know.
We did ask them.
Oh.
So... Whitney, what is the early context that I would have to understand about you and your life to understand you?
I think probably broken gender dynamics. Growing up, I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah. I don't know if you know much about
I know it
Salt Lake City, Utah. Yep. So it's a very LDS is kind of the formal religious term, or better known as Mormon place. And my dad is Jewish and my mother is Catholic. So I'm already a total anomaly in this place. And it's a very tough community to fit into when you don't look, act, behave like everybody else or have the exact same belief systems. And the Mormon faith and the LDS faith, not to generalize, but it's very much a community, or at least it was. I was born in 1989. So growing up back in the 90s, it was very much a man's world where the man is the breadwinner, the man is out, mom is at home in an apron, and everyone follows rules, lots of rules, very strict rules, in fact. And I think I always grew up with a conflicting set of values to my community, to this ecosystem I was placed in, or was raised in rather. And then that started to come out in relationships. So my first, real boyfriend that I ever had, it was quite toxic. And these were kind of these undertones of my entire life that would then set the stage for my entire career.
Using that first relationship, that first sort of toxic relationship as an example of how your belief system at that point was causing problems, Could you give me some color to what you mean there?
Yeah, it was a new experience for me. I was a young girl at the time, and I think there was this set of behaviors I was expected to adhere to be on his rules, his what he believed was right, and it was quite demoralizing, frankly. And I don't think at the time I fully recognized what was taking place until later in life, but it set the stage for me about unhealthy relationships. And I recognized just how unequal women were when it came to their romantic relationships. So if you were to fast forward, here I am running this business where women make the first move, which when I put that into the product in 2014 was squawked at and eyes were rolled, and people couldn't understand why we would do such a thing because women aren't supposed to talk first. So if you look at that moment of a business being born, there's so much more than just a eureka thought. It's really pent up years and years of confusion, passion, purpose brewing to essentially be born into this moment of Bumble.
Were you rebelling at all against that environment or that belief system?
I think there was two sides of that coin. There was the side that wanted to fit in, desperate to be a part of my community, desperate to be a part of what was around me and to fit in and to fit the mold, because that's humans. Humans want to fit into their environments. They want to be accepted. No one wants to be the child sitting alone at the lunch table. This is what devastates humans, to be left out, right? So there was a part of me that so desperately wanted validation and to fit. And then there was a part of me that said, this is wrong. This doesn't feel right. This feels against my soul. This doesn't feel like how things should be. And I feel like that's been a theme of my life. There's been duality on this topic in every situation I've been in. And that's part of navigating it.
How do we navigate that duality? Because we all experience those sort of conflicting needs at the same time. Often one of them is like an external one colliding with an internal need that's going unmet. And it feels sometimes like we have to choose, as you said, like the external comfort of fitting in or validation versus like, this doesn't feel good to me inside.
I think for me, at least, I have to live in a place of authenticity. And I've lived in chapters of my life that were not authentic, that I knew what I was participating in or what I was doing didn't feel authentic to what I really believed in or what I knew to be right. And genuinely, authenticity wins. That's my fundamental belief. And I think that when you follow and chase that authentic space, the world opens up for you. The world unlocks.
Sometimes in the short term, especially if we've had a prolonged period of being inauthentic, what we've done accidentally and inadvertently is created an environment and a community and a job and an environment where that's built on that inauthenticity. Mm-hmm. So to make the change to one day be like, do you know what, today I'm going to be authentic requires, it seems like quite a lot of short-term loss, especially disapproval, people going, stay in line, stay who we thought you were, be the person that we resonated with, even if that was your inauthentic self. So that I think I see so many people kind of contend with that. They kind of might know who they are, that voice inside, but the apparent cost of pursuing it seems because mom and dad and my boyfriend, and I'd have to leave the city and my job and my friendship,
Of course. You have to leave the tribe.
Yeah. It's terrifying.
Terrifying. It's almost unimaginable for people. And I've been there. I've felt that feeling before. And I think this is why so many people stay in whatever situation they're in. Stay in a marriage, stay in a business, stay in a church, stay in a team, stay in you name it. This is what perpetuates the cycle of the quest to fit in versus just truly being who you really are. And so that age-old saying, be yourself, it's harder than it looks. It's really hard, and it comes with a lot of risk. And it's scary and it's dangerous. And what if I fail? And what if no one likes me? And what if everyone judges me? These are real things. But at the end of the day, nothing could be worse than having a broken relationship with yourself, right? I personally think a broken relationship with yourself is more toxic than a pseudo phony good relationship with 100 other people. But it's hard to give ourselves that love and compassion. We're hard on ourselves. The things we say to ourselves is something we would never say to another, ever. I mean, think about that rhetoric, the internal self-talk. We would never say those things to other people, right? And the compliments we pay others, it's very hard to pay ourselves. So when you think about that narrative, how can we expect people to have the confidence and courage to be authentic to themselves if they're not even willing to accept themselves? So I think that's a big piece of it, right? And I've watched over the years, women I grew up with in Salt Lake City, just now in their 30s, they're coming out of their cage. They're quite literally coming alive. And they're taking to TikTok and to social media, and they're taking to all these platforms like a roaring lion saying, I'm alive, and I've been hiding, and I've been living by standards, and I've been living by rules, and I've been living by X, Y, and Z, and it's not authentic. So at some point, it will burst open. You know, like that. The truth is, the truth does prevail.
When you were 18, what was acceptance or success to you? If I asked you at 18 years old what you want to be post-uni when you grow up, what would the answer have been at that point?
Well, the answer of what I really wanted to be was not what I would have said, because I would have said something to fit in, right? That's standard. So I think the young women, when I was in college, all wanted to go work for a fashion brand or get a job at a bank or be successful, and they wanted to get married. And they wanted to find someone that they could marry, settle down with, have kids with eventually. Maybe not next year, but that was part of the program, right? This dating game exists as college students. And this is where the undertones of Bumble started to really form, because I remember being in college and being completely judged and made fun of by girlfriends of mine if I texted a guy first. I remember I went on a date, which was so out of my character. I really, believe it or not, being so ingrained in the dating world. I think I've been on maybe 3 dates in my life. That sounds weird. But I went on a date and then I texted the guy afterwards. And they were like, oh, no, you have committed a sin. A sin. Like, you should be ashamed of yourself. It made me cry. I felt so embarrassed. I felt so ashamed. And I remember thinking, this is wrong. What is wrong with you? Why can we not text? Who wrote these rules? What are these rules? These rules are ridiculous. So this desire to break the rules, change the rules, rewrite the rules was something I inherently felt deep down. But everybody's felt that. You've felt that. Everybody has felt that. It's just who chooses to go and actually act on it is the difference.
I was thinking then when you talked about being 18 and having this kind of sort of social expectation of what success would look like, and then having a family was the orientation of a lot of young women at that point. Do you think there are any gender differences that are innate to us that have a bearing on the path or the way that we show up, that are innate, i.e. not social constructs? But do you think there's anything in us as men and women that makes us want different things from birth innately?
You know, it's a good question. And I have 2 little boys right now. And I think a lot of this is imposed on us as a society. I really do. I think the toys we buy our children and the clothes we put on our children and the shows we show our children, you have to really ask yourself, is this not truly forming what they're interested in and what they care about and what their ambitions are? I do believe that there may be something, and I see this in men too, to folks that genuinely want to have a family and have children and be part of that type of a life, and then folks that just genuinely don't. But I don't really see it I don't think it's a gender thing. I really think that these are just a personal soul level thing. But I think society comes in and puts bows on it or puts trucks on it and says, here's your path. So it's interesting now raising kids, seeing if I really believe this nature versus nurture thing. And I think there's components to it, but I think it's definitely more imposed upon us by others around. This morning, I was watching my son read a book at breakfast. I don't know where he found the book. I think it was something he found at the restaurant, but I opened it and it was a picture of a pig family in a little house, and you could see everything in all the different rooms. And Daddy was upstairs in the bathroom combing his hair in a suit. And the pig mom was it's like the pig family. The piggy mom was in the kitchen in a pink dress with an apron cooking eggs. And I was just thinking to myself, here is a almost 3-year-old, and these are the books they're reading, and it says, where's Daddy and where's Mommy? So we have to imagine that we do some of this to the kids around us.
Did you burn the book?
I took a picture of it and raved about it. I raged about it at work for about 3 hours, and we will not be reading the book again.
Okay, good. What was your formal education per se? What was in terms of university or anything like that? What did you study?
Yeah, so I went to a college in Texas, and I really wanted to go into marketing, and I wanted to go into advertising and marketing, which is funny because now somehow I have ended up there a little bit. And I sat down for the test and completely failed it. I could not answer any of the questions. It was so confusing to me. It was all about, return on investment and television views. And it was super, not to be disrespectful, but super boring. I was like, this is probably not for me. But anyway, I did not get it accepted. So I studied international studies. And that was just this huge mix of big people problems, globalization, anthropology, women's studies, gender studies, international relations. I mean, it was really fascinating. And that was the best marketing degree I could have ever gotten because it's the study of people. Why do people do what they do? And if you look at the business I'm in, I'm quite literally immersed all day long into why do people date who they date? Why do they want what they want? How do they behave? Why do they get aggressive? What causes aggression? What causes online abuse? Where is this stemming from? And this stuff is really interesting. So I'd say my education really did help me connect those dots.
And as you leave that degree, that gap between like the working world and leaving university, college, what was that gap, and what were you thinking in that moment? Where were you heading? What were you applying for? Where were you seeking the next chapter of your life?
So I really wanted to be a travel photographer, like a photojournalist. And I had no training in that, obviously, but I was just obsessed with the idea. And it's actually funny, at the Bumble office right now, we have this photo of this incredible woman that I met in Burma, and she is holding a Bumble lighter. And it's my never made it to Nat Geo moment. But that was my dream. I wanted to be a Nat Geo photographer. And so I went traveling through Southeast Asia. And took a lot of photos. And I remember on my travels thinking, gosh, there's such a disconnect for someone trying to explore a new country, place. It's only TripAdvisor. And if you follow TripAdvisor, you end up eating a hamburger in Laos at some version of a Hard Rock, right? And this is not really the experience. I thought, why can't I get to know a local? I want to ride around on the back of a moped in Laos. And I want to go understand, what do they do here? Like, where do the 18-year-olds go? What was their life like? Like, what does their day look like? And I thought, why is there not an app that does this? Why is there not something on my phone that can put me in touch with these people? But then, of course, that idea fell by the wayside, went into, the back of my brain somewhere. And by chance, one day would end up in this wild world of connecting people on the internet. So some of these things were already brewing and already starting to bubble up in ways that wouldn't totally expose themselves yet.
By chance, you ended up in this weird world of connecting people. What was that chance?
So the chance was that I went to a dinner in Los Angeles one night with one of my very dear friends, and she had been friendly with a couple of these guys in LA, and we all ended up at dinner because I didn't end up driving back to my mom's house that night. It got too dark and it was quite a long drive. So we all had dinner and I was staying at her house. And one of the guys at dinner was the general manager of this incubator and was telling me all about this incubator. And here I was, a 22-year-old, just barely 22, if that even, 2-year-old woman that needed a job. I needed to make money. I needed to find my way in the world. And I had just been kind of adventuring and, seeing the world and exploring and taking this very, risky path of not going straight into a career and going to travel and going to see the world and find my passion. And he said, well, maybe you could take a marketing job. And I said, okay, I'll try. I'll call you tomorrow. And he's like, okay, probably thought I'd never call. And I did. Long story short, that incubator would be the incubator where we ended up launching Tinder. So it was by happenstance that connection happened. But I think it was about taking advantage of an opportunity, right? Seeing an opportunity, and it didn't feel perfect. And I think this is a good lesson for people, is the way it was described to me at that dinner. People think, oh, well, she got so lucky. She met the so-and-so of so-and-so. That's not what it was like. That concept of Tinder was never mentioned. It was never called Tinder at the time. And it was a totally different opportunity, but it was putting my foot in the door of something that would then turn into something else and something else. And I think so many people wait around for the most perfect headline when it comes to an opportunity that they can't really see or read between the lines. And everybody has that potential. Everybody can do that. They just have to be willing to say, well, this is a stepping stone, or this is a door that I could bust open, right? And I think that's kind of how I've tried to approach most things in my career.
It's so true. It's, that moment there, there's so many other outcomes that could have happened from a dinner. Namely, one of them is you just don't call the person back. I mean, the amount of times in my life someone's given me their number and said, call me, and I just haven't called back most of the time.
99%.
Yeah.
It's like all of us do that.
Yeah. But there's a philosophy of like leaning into stuff, especially when you're young, just like leaning in, regardless of certainties. You've described
Take a chance.
it. Yeah. And people have I see this in people, I'm sure you have as well, where people have a tendency to be like lean in people or kind of just lean out people. Even when the world is changing, crypto, Bitcoin, blockchain, all these things, Meta, typically people lean in or lean out.
Yeah.
And I think people that lean in are the ones that end up creating opportunity, which looks like luck in hindsight.
Yeah, I agree with you. And being brave enough to just say, even if it doesn't work out, at least I explored it, right? I think people, what I've seen, and it's something that I'm guilty of as well in my life, is it's a risk. And we have to be willing to get excited about risk instead of being afraid of it.
It's the uncertainty though, isn't it? How good are you at dealing with uncertainty? How guaranteed do you need the outcome to be before you take a step?
Right. And for me, not very guaranteed personally, because it's like, what do you have to lose, right? Are you creating risk for yourself? Not really. But I do think that it's scary to pick up the phone and make that first move, right? Which would then become Bumble's entire mantra and tagline and product and everything. But making the first move and taking that first step can change your life. But you have to do it. No one can do it for you. And I learned that the hard way. I had very little support along the way in terms of advocates or community. I had a handful of people I could call upon, but candidly, even when I was starting Bumble, all of my confidants, with the exception of a couple, were like, no, don't do this. Why? Why would you expose yourself to this? What's the point? That won't work. There's already dating apps. They're going to eat you alive. And you can get bogged down in that. It's easy to drown in that noise.
In those early years of Tinder, I remember being told this story maybe 10 years ago in San Francisco when I was working there with a guy called Michael Birch, who was the old Bebo founder. You'll know Bebo. Bebo, the old social network. Oh no, it didn't go to the US. It was just predominantly
not sure
in the UK.
I remember that.
It was like Facebook here before Facebook.
Okay, cool.
And he in his little sort of incubator that I was in when I was 20, they were telling me the Tinder story of how you went to a fraternity.
Mm-hmm.
For people that don't know what a fraternity is, what's a fraternity?
So I guess in the UK it would be like college clubs, maybe.
Yeah.
Do they have like members clubs or something like that?
We
So
don't really
basically,
have
sororities and fraternities, and sororities are a house of women, and fraternities are a house of men. And there's different names, so they all have these Greek names, right? So, for example, the one I joined was Kappa Kappa Gamma. You could have Tri Delta. There's all sorts of them, and essentially, a lot of college students, they do something called rush, where they rush and they go house to house and they meet all the women or all the men, and then they basically they put in the name of the one they would really love to be a part of, and then they see who accepted them back. It's been criticized up and down, and there's a lot of things that are not, spectacular about it, but this is a way a lot of people find friendship and community. It's a community gathering for their college campus. So with Tinder, I essentially went back to my alma mater at SMU. I just graduated, so a lot of my best friends were still in school. So I got access to the campus, and I would start at the sororities and then go to the fraternities. So I'd essentially have all the young women download it and then run to the fraternity, and then they would download it, and then everyone would start connecting. So, is that good? Is that bad? How do you want to chop that up 10 years later? Who knows? But that's the reality, and can't escape the truth. But so you heard about this way back when?
I heard about this 10 years ago because we were building community-centric apps. We're building something called Blab, which resembles what Clubhouse is now. And when we were talking about the marketing strategy, Tinder kept coming up. And Sean Puri, the company got acquired by Amazon in the end, Twitch, who own Amazon, other way around, Amazon owned Twitch. But yeah, that was the thesis. It was like, should we go to fraternities and go get, and to try and build that sort of isolated, tight community to try and get product market fit?
Yeah.
Because network effects really, really matter, especially in the dating game.
The most important.
Yeah.
That's why there's only a handful of dating apps that have ever survived. I mean, at least during my time doing this, which is almost a decade now. But what's interesting is there's such a, not to say only I could do this or only somebody else could do this, but there was a superpower in the timing of it all because I had just graduated and I knew all of these people. So if some random startup founder knocks on a sorority door, the police are coming. You can't do that. So I felt like I had this insider hook, right? Because I was technically an extension of that by proxy because I had just been on the college campus and all of my girlfriends were still there. So they were part of these sororities and all my guy friends were there. They were part of these fraternities. So I'll never forget, I took the photo of one of my guy friends back then who was, all the young women had mega crush on him. And then I took the photo of my best friend, Danielle, who was very well liked on campus. And I went into Danny's journalism class because she was still a student. And I basically snuck into her journalism class and used Photoshop. And I took the Tinder screens and I put the guy's face on one and her face on the other. And I said, find out who likes you on campus. And then I saved it to a file because this is the olden days at this point. And I went to FedEx, which is like the office supply store across the street. And I printed 1,000 copies. And I quite literally handed different students on campus $20 to go distribute them under dorm doors and to put them on windshields and to put them, in their different social clubs and to essentially distribute these flyers everywhere. So this entire campus, and now in hindsight, it's probably not great. It's littering. There's all sorts of bad things involved with it, but I'm just telling you a story. So, basically that was just one of the tactics I used to go and put it all over campus. And then I had a few T-shirts printed up that said, don't ask for my number, find me on Tinder. And I had my girlfriends wear the T-shirts and we went to the bar. And so I gave them, a couple $100 and they would go around and buy drinks. And then when people would ask for their number, they'd essentially say, you have to download Tinder. So it was a lot of these tiny hacking concepts that made no sense. No one had ever done these things before. I had no playbook. It wasn't like, I was reading some manual to marketing. It was just what felt around me. It was just bringing the real life dating experience to life through an app, marketing.
There's like so many important messages of marketing there. I mean, the first one that you said was that you were the customer. You were so close to the customer that you understood them. I mean, even you said about how if another startup had come and knocked on the sorority, well, they wouldn't have even known which door to knock on for a start.
That's true.
I mean? Like,
right.
They would have knocked on the wrong door, got the wrong people, and they wouldn't have understood those people, their motivation. So like really you being the customer, I think is such a key thing. And then the second thing you said about like, if I'd read a marketing book and you were kind of just doing it based on intuition, I've seen over and over again from speaking to really successful CEOs and founders how important naivety was. Like not knowing the rules.
So important. Just following your gut.
Yeah, because then that's like that's creating something from first principles as opposed to convention. That's real innovation, right? Like, and it creates solutions that are more suited for today and for the challenge that you're solving, which no one has ever had the challenge of solving on that date ever.
Right.
But naivety, and this is sometimes why I think some of the best founders don't come from like business school or from marketing school. The best marketeers aren't marketing graduates. Because naivety is such a superpower.
It's a superpower, and following your instinct. And if you understand what moves people and what motivates people, then you have this opportunity to connect with them on a real level. I mean, we've done things that are ridiculous. So I remember we would make these signs that said, they had the big X's, like no, like you're not allowed to. And they said no Facebook, no Instagram, no Snapchat, no Bumble. This was like week 3 of Bumble or something, some ridiculous early, maybe first year, I can't remember at this point. And we would post those all over the universities. So there was this association where it was like, wait, I can't do the things I really want to do. I want to sit in class in Snapchat. I want to sit in class in Instagram. What the hell is Bumble? And so we were essentially seeding this psychological curiosity. Yeah. And then we were actually sending young women wearing Bumble shirts into classes 10 or 15 minutes late, interrupting a class of 300 people and saying, oh, sorry, wrong room. But everyone's looking at this young woman or young man, whoever it was, wearing a Bumble t-shirt. So we were seeding curiosity and this like, why is Bumble everywhere type of thing. And so, a lot of people think, oh, well, I can just go start an app and I'll just buy some, Instagram ads and I'll just be successful. But if people only knew the fraction of the insane everyday little hacks that, I did and our team did to bring this to life, we were the first people, certainly the first tech brand to do humor accounts, to pay for the humor memes. Do you remember the humor memes?
Well, we had about 100 million followers on meme accounts. So
yeah, so all about this. But like we were way back years and years ago, I remember reaching out to, I can't remember what it was, one of these meme accounts. And they're like, wait, you want to pay us to... I'm confused. How does that work? And we're like, okay, here's the deal. We'll give you $100 or whatever it was. We turn around a year later, that same account is charging $100,000 a post. So there's also something about luck and timing, being just right before something, And if you look at Bumble, we were also beating the woman drum, this drum of we need to advocate for women, beating this drum of let's put women first. Let's elevate women. Women are not equal in their relationships. Women are not being treated respectfully. Women are being abused on the internet. Women are not being treated right. We were saying this in 2014, and then Me Too would come a couple of years later. So I think we've been lucky as a business to basically be right before the wave. And then we've been able to be a part of that wave versus chasing a wave. And so many people chase a wave. They look around them like, well, what's cool? How do I chase that? And I feel like we've always had the good fortune or whatever you want to call it.
Conviction.
Sure.
Inspiration.
To go first. And so that's been maybe a superpower of ours over the years.
Because you're making those decisions, it's so clear to me, you're making those decisions from original thought and from like what I think Elon calls like first principles, as in what do we know is true and create a solution from that versus how is it done? How has it been done before? And that like, and even you being early to the meme account things, just for context, we were probably maybe one of the first companies in the world, I'd say, to do the meme thing. That's really like how my business began. We had like 100 million followers on these meme accounts. That became this big social media business, this big media company, and it can e-com, and then it went public. But it started with meme accounts.
It's amazing.
And this is how I met, I think, your original investor. It's how I met Badoo. It's how I remember having these long conversations with them in London about, we'll make you trend #1 on Twitter. We'll do a thunderclap. All the accounts say it the same. Like, but for you to have been one of the brands that was leaning into that.
You know what? The brands had, no, and to your point, yes, the meme accounts were there. You were pioneering all of that. But I don't know if you experienced this. Brands did not see their place there. And the brands 100%. That did, that I had seen, had been like, buy my bracelet or buy my fashion company. You know, it was something very consumer centric, which made sense. But it wasn't the download my app. Yeah. And that was such a different way of promoting something. Even for the app world, it was so out of bounds for the app space, because the app space used traditional app space acquisition strategies.
You're right. It wasn't. And the reason why we managed to get so many followers was because people didn't value those accounts. So I remember buying BeFit Motivation, which had about 10 million, I'll say, followers. Love Food, which had about 7 million followers, and BeFit Motivation on Twitter, which had 2 million followers on Twitter. Just that 20 million followers cost me about 10 grand.
Oh my God.
And then
Can you imagine? It's like really good real estate. It's like buying a house in some crazy part of London 1,000 years ago.
And then all the other accounts were free. Because
unbelievable.
I offered the people jobs that ran them. It's you'll have a proper job, you get paid loads. I know your mum doesn't think it's a job. I think it's a job.
I see you. I validate you.
People are like, oh, you're exploiting. Well, no, nobody valued it back then. And then they eventually did value those social media accounts. And what you're talking about, the whole, it was attention. It was attention. It was eyeballs. And from a first principles perspective, you go, well, we want attention and eyeballs. They are here. I don't care if it's safe, cool, or the done thing. That's where we're going to go. And I saw Bumble doing that. And I've seen all the things that Bumble have done over the years, and it always seems to be original in its nature. It feels that way. It feels like someone has had an original thought today about how to solve a problem, and they're not just focused on showing what Bumble is. They're communicating how you should feel about Bumble.
That was always the goal.
Yeah.
And I think there was a lot of people that thought it was ridiculous early on. They're like, why are you doing a campaign that has nothing to do with dating? We did this huge campaign where our team put together this, huge push on be the CEO your parents always wanted you to marry. And then in parentheses, it said, and then find someone you actually like or want to date. And I remember a lot of people being like, we're not going to do this. There's no ROI here. What's the ROI? There's no call to action. There's no download in the App Store. And what was fascinating was it built this wild following of our brand. So people that would never have downloaded a dating app are now wearing our hat. Now their mother is carrying around a Bumble tote because they're proud of the brand. And they are, it created this untangible feeling, right? This magic. And there was a sentiment that was more powerful than any, ROI campaign you could do on any other channel. And so I feel like for me, I always wanted Bumble to be more than just an app in your pocket. I wanted it to be something that gave you a feeling, and a good feeling, not a bad one. Because so many of these products give us bad feelings, and they make us feel uninspired, and they make us feel lonely. They make us feel broken. They make us feel exhausted. And I wanted us to do something different. And our team wanted us to do something different. We had such a passionate team. We still have an incredibly passionate team, but that early community of our team is really what made this company so magical, right? It was that genuine purpose and buy-in and, candidly, naivete. Our team was young. Our team was separated from a lot of our infrastructure, meaning like a lot of the more technical stuff was isolated from the marketing stuff. And I've been criticized over the years by the, the tech publications and the tech this and the tech that and whatever. I don't really care. The point is, it's been like, well, this isn't how Silicon Valley does it. Where are the engineers and why are this? And why aren't you sitting with the engineers? And why are you da-da-da-da? And there was a method to the madness. It was, let's let this team go out and paint the town yellow and do it with no interruption, no distraction. And then let's let our fantastic infrastructure team really solve big problems through tech while these two, heart and brain, can operate together, right? And it had never really been done before in this like traditional Silicon Valley world.
My first startup experience is not like my second startup experience. You learn all the lessons. You learn, well, hopefully you learn the lessons. I think I've hopefully learned some of them. But your first startup experience at Tinder, this is when, because especially when it's moving at the speed of light.
Light.
I mean, my startup didn't move at the speed of light quite like Tinder did, but still absolutely the speed of light Tinder moved at. And there's that culture out in San Francisco about, move fast and break things, which is, I think, Facebook popularized. I think that was their slogan. But everyone kind of has adopted that mindset of just go fucking lightning fast and figure it out later. Fix it while we're falling kind of thing. Talk to me about that. Talk to me about the cost of that, what it taught you, and really give me a picture of what it was like in those early rocket ship days.
Well, I think it was so new to everyone involved. No one really understood what the next day held. This was such a different time also. Instagram had just had its big sale. Now in retrospect, not such a big sale, but at the time, remarkable, right? Still remarkable regardless. And it was just such a new environment. Tech was still relatively niche. Mobile was very niche, right? It was not super mainstream. Apps were kind of hitting the scene, but not like where we are today. There's an app for this or app for that. And we were this tight tribe of people that really probably had not much to do with each other outside of this, but it became this 24/7 unit, and we were just fighting every day to keep it going. I mean, our blood, sweat, and tears went into this business, right? So when I left, it was completely devastating because I wasn't just leaving this rocket ship of a business. That's one thing. But I've just been essentially, one day in a 24/7 environment with the same people for more than 2 years, to the next day, never seeing any of them ever again. And in the middle of that, ending up on the front page of all sorts of magazines and newspapers because of the narrative of the ending, right? And it was extremely traumatic. Extremely. I think I was stuck in fight or flight mode for years because, that was all I knew for years. And it had been such a 0 to 100 experience. As you know, when you're in these startups, they're almost their own. I'm definitely not accusing the company of being this, but they become their own little cults.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to go from that one day to not that the next day, and then to go end up launching a woman version to some degree within 6 months of leaving. So if you can just try to imagine what every day looked like to both mourn and grieve my exit from Tinder and deal with all the logistical pieces of it and the media pieces of it, which were coming at me. I had reporters trying to go through my window at my little apartment in Beverly Hills from some rag magazine. I mean, this is just crazy for me. I was a nobody. I mean, I'm still technically a nobody, but it's not like I was on some reality show and I became popular overnight. Like, this was traumatizing to me. And You know, it's funny, like the land of everyone trying to be famous. I was probably maybe one of the only people not at that point, right? So it was very crazy to just all of a sudden, in a very scandalous way, by the way I was described in the media, I was literally painted as this like scandalous gone girl of the tech world. And it was soul crushing because it's not who I was. It's not who I am. So I was watching this narrative unfold about me, and I was in these Twitter discussions with all the most important people in the tech world. And it was just crazy. I was just watching this narrative unfold about this person that wasn't me. And then I'm turning around in the same breath, meeting up with Andre. And then I'm, you know, even before that, trying to start Merci, this compliments-oriented, kinder social network, which then I meet up with Andre, and one thing leads to another, and now Bumble is my new path. And now we're starting Bumble, and this is all going on. It was a whirlwind. A whirlwind.
What is the context you're able to share about why they were writing those headlines about you and why you are ostracized from your, as you've described it, something that felt a little bit like a cult, which is actually a good description of how all my companies are pretty much started. It feels like a 24/7
Doesn't
indoctrinated.
it feel that way?
Come on, we're going to take over the world. It's that kind of...
It's crazy.
Yeah,
I mean, like the way people speak about what you're going to do. I mean, there's such big ideas and there's such like passionate ideas. And then you go from real world, which is so mundane, right? It's like quite boring out there in the real world, to this like super like high energy, you know, there's, you know, going to be a disaster if we don't do this in the next 5 minutes. This is crashing. That's crashing. This metric's up. This metric's off. One day you're booming. The next day you're crashing. I mean, the adrenaline, you know what I'm talking about, the ups and the downs and the hard work that goes into it and the skipping meals and the no sleep. And
everything feels potentially fatal as well at that point, doesn't it?
Fatal.
Yeah.
And the other thing that is interesting is you can't connect with everybody else the way you used to because they can't quote unquote get it. They don't get it, you know? So it's like trying to like have a Sunday afternoon meal with your family or your friends during that. You're like, I can't. Like, we don't even speak the same language anymore. So
I'll just avoid them.
Yeah.
That's a waste of time.
You have no idea what's going on. So, which in hindsight, I think I lived in that mindset for years between Tinder and Bumble. I mean, kind of coming up for air now and having time to breathe and think, like I'm sure a lot of people that have built companies feel this way, though. I'm sure you feel this way, where you're like, whoa, I isolated myself from a lot of important relationships, that there's regret to that at some point. Do you ever feel that way?
100%. I was incredibly lonely. I didn't speak to my family, didn't really see them for many, many years. And I thought that something mattered much more. And you eventually, even if I used to think I was immune, but eventually your body will remind you that you are a human too, and you have needs, and your needs are being unmet. And the signal will come in many ways. I hear the signal sometimes come for people. They'll have panic attacks. They'll feel a growing sense of loneliness. Their health will give out. I've had certain examples where the body has just shut down.
Yeah.
And it's
I've gone through that.
Yeah. As you know, Intel are now one of the sponsors of this podcast, and I'm here to tell you about one of the latest Intel Evo designs. I've been recently using this laptop, and honestly, I've been blown away by how user-friendly it is to use. Intel has spent thousands of hours studying the way people use their laptops and then collaborating with leading PC makers to co-engineer, optimize and test these laptops to create the Intel Evo platform, which delivers the ultimate mobile experience. Laptop designers only receive the Intel Evo badge after they've been rigorously tested to pass Intel's own strict requirements and deliver an ideal combination of features such as long-lasting fast-charging battery, Wi-Fi connectivity standards, and a super slim design. The result is a premium laptop that delivers an ideal combination of features. In the coming weeks, I'm going to break down exactly what features you get when you buy an Intel Evo certified laptop and how they've made my life on the go 10 times easier. To find out more about the Intel Evo platform, go to intel.co.uk/Evo and let me know how you get on. This episode is brought to you by Mercedes-Benz, who recently got in touch to support the Diary of a CEO. Thank you. I'm a huge fan of their cars. In fact, I have one of my own, which is like an office on wheels. And they have an exciting wide range of cars that I'd love to tell you about. The Mercedes EQ is the luxury electric range of Mercedes-Benz, and it is available across many models from the SUVs to the saloons, meaning they're ideal for all business needs. The innovative next-generation technology found in all Mercedes EQ cars is really paving the way for the electric car industry. To make your electric car switch so much easier, Mercedes-Benz has a service called Mercedes Me Charge. It's a subscription which provides you with access to a wide network of charging stations across the entirety of the UK. The app shows you the precise location and current availability and price at the selected charging station of your choice, and this enables businesses to effectively plan their route ahead of their journey. You can search Mercedes-Benz fleet today to discover how the Mercedes EQ car range can help your business get ahead. And if you already drive a Mercedes EQ, let me know how you find it. I read that your departure from Tinder was ominous, to say the least. In fact, that's actually the word that's written in my notes in 2014. And in the early days of the founding of Tinder, you'd had a relationship with somebody, that relationship had ended. You were then treated in a pretty horrendous way from everything that I read online, threatened multiple times, people saying that they would fire you for things that they didn't have a justification to fire you for, sort of patronizing, condescending behavior to the fact that you were a young female co-founder, and how they would take that co-founder title from you. It's actually really hard for me to read, actually, just from, it kind of makes me feel a sense of injustice in my core. You were called annoying and dramatic at certain times when you raised certain concerns. And as a result, you ended up leaving the company. You were fired, I read. You were fired from the company, which is even worse, when you raised certain concerns. You then filed a lawsuit, which went on, and there was certain actions taken, and there was a reported settlement reached at one point. But overall, your treatment while you were at Tinder, specifically from men, read to me like it was allegedly horrific and unfair and sexist. And then upon leaving Tinder, there's this huge wave of press who are mischaracterizing you, what happened, and you fall into this situation where you've been in this cult, we'll call it a cult because that's how it often feels to both of us, for so long. You come out of that and you're greeted with this wall of like mischaracterization, attacks, from all sides, and you're kind of out on your own then. That's the moment where you're ostracized from the tribe, and you're dealing with this wave of negativity.
Yeah, so, I'm legally really not meant to comment on the Tinder times, but what I will say is I was literally broken during that chapter where I was waking up to headlines about myself. Like you said, I was being described in all sorts of ways, and people were calling my uncle and my ex-boyfriend. I mean, it was this digging, weird investigation into my life, and all I wanted was to just do my job, right? And so it was a very dark, toxic moment, and I felt so alone, and I felt so unsupported because this was before Me Too. This is before Time's Up. Any woman that said anything out of line was called names, and this was still during a chapter, even in modern land, that was not really pro-women. And so no matter what I said or did, I wasn't going to be able to get through. There was judgment. I had friends from college didn't want to talk to me anymore. They're like, "Oh, this feels icky. This isn't that cool." Like all of it, I was ostracized. I had a scarlet letter. And that was such a devastating feeling because let's just remember, I was just a young professional. I was 24 years old and I'd been working my tail off for 2+ years. I had obviously teamwork makes the dream work. I still fundamentally believe that, but I had played my role, and an important one, right? To get the company to where it was. So to be called all of these names and to be basically just written off by Twitter and the random media and the random everyone. And I have big respect for media, and I'm not criticizing them. I'm just saying this was the narrative at the time. So it was really hard. I was super depressed. I was paranoid. I actually don't think I left the house for like 3 weeks at one point. I'll never forget, actually, I don't even know if I've told this story. Maybe I have. But when I was launching Bumble again, because you have to remember, Bumble launched within 6 months of my departure. So not the departure itself, but 6 months from kind of when the legal pieces were put to bed. That was August. I want to say August 3rd. December 1st, Bumble was live in the App Store. You know how much work goes into launching something. It's a 24-hour job. I had another 24-hour job of grieving and being in fight or flight defense mode of whatever Twitter was coming after me with. And it was really hard. So I think there was a chapter where I didn't leave the house for several weeks. And when I was launching Bumble, I think it was Business Insider, I can't remember who, they were doing a piece on Bumble and they needed a picture of me. And I was like, well, I'm not taking any pictures. There's no way. I'm in sweatpants and Uggs. I'm not leaving this house. So I went outside in my front yard in sweatpants and Uggs with a sweater on and did like a half fake smile and had someone take a picture on some camera I had at home that I had, used way back when I wanted to be a travel journalist, and use that. And I just had to peel myself back up. I just had to peel myself off the ground. And I was lucky to have a couple really strong people in my life that had my back, like my now husband, like Andre. There were a couple people that were like, I don't care what people say about you. I don't care. We believe in you. We know that you're capable. We know you're smart. We know that you can do this again. So you need to go chase your dreams. You're not done. And, I very soon after leaving Tinder, in this moment of despair and drinking too much, not like socially, like at home, like very depressed, trying to numb myself in any way I could, I had this moment where I was like, I have to solve this. Part of my psyche is find a problem and solve it. It could be anything, micro, anything. It's just part of the way my brain works. And the being attacked on the internet felt like such a big problem to me. And I felt like this was something so many people were going through. So many young girls in particular were going through, being bullied. And I thought to myself, I'm an adult. Like, I can get in a car and I can drive to a grocery store and I can do all these things. These young women are trapped at home after school, often in bad circumstances at home, and they're being abused by people they actually know. How horrible would that be? I'm getting attacked by strangers. They're getting attacked by friends at school and strangers, not really in the sense of stranger to us, like proxy strangers, right? Friends of friends. And I was like, I have to fix this. I have to fix this. It's my duty on earth to fix this. So I started quite literally with a pencil and a pen. I still have the early drawings, sketching out a new social network. It was called Merci. And the only currency and the only way to communicate was compliments. So instead of saying, you're stupid, or you don't look good, or you're this, or body shaming, or that, or even, hey, you're so skinny, something that is negative, even though it feels positive, I wanted it just to be compliments. And so it was essentially supposed to be the girls' dressing room, the girls' bathroom. When young women go out to nightclubs, there's this saying that young women are so nice to each other in the bathroom at a nightclub. And I wanted to bring that to life. So I started sketching that out to basically rebuild myself. And long story short, eventually Bumble would become what it was. I met Andre, and then, I had known him, but I reconnected with Andre. One thing led to the next, and Bumble was born. So I think what people don't realize, I've had a lot of people that maybe I went to college with. They're like, oh my God, you've had such a good career. You're so lucky. You're so successful. I'm like, it's been pretty dark. It's been pretty heavy.
Dark. Is there because I reflect on my darkest times, and I can typically remember a worse day. Mm-hmm. A day when, I just couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. What was your darkest day throughout that period?
I have several that are pretty visceral and memorable. But one that I think maybe is something people can actually tangibly like put themselves into this moment. I mean, you can imagine there's lots of tough moments along the way. But one was we had worked so hard to build Bumble in stealth mode, starting from about August through, call it November. So head down 4 or 5 months of just like 24 hours a day back into the, the grind. And it was really important to me not to attach my name to it. I was so scared of putting my name on it. I didn't want to muddy it. I was like, I'm in the media as this like scandalous person right now, and I don't want to be known for. I don't want this to be about me. I want this to be about what the product is and what the mission is. I want women to go first in their relationships. I want women to be empowered. And I remember we had worked so hard to keep my name out of it. I had like a pseudo email that I was using to reach out to certain people that I thought could, maybe leak that this was happening. And we were going to launch in mid-December. They'd gone on this investigative adventure of sorts of following all my early employees and ambassadors. And they were going through all the images and piecing together this story about this new product that was launching. And the headline said something along the lines, maybe not verbatim, but it was really hurtful. It was like, basically, I'm summarizing how I internalized it. Surprise, surprise, like the scorned woman from Tinder launches her own dating app, but women go first. And oh, I hear she really likes bees. She's called it Bumble. Like it was so hurtful. And I just sobbed, and I sobbed because there had been so much work that went into coming back, rising from the ashes and pulling myself back up. And to keep it in this kind of stealth position away from me and not make it about that, women have and everyone, every gender, we all have an opportunity and I believe a human right to start over. We all have the right to start over. None of us should be held hostage to a certain chapter in our lives or a certain thing in our lives. Like we should all be able to get back up, right? If we're still breathing, you have that right. And that felt like my right to starting over on my own terms was taken from me. And it was really violating. So in my typical fashion, I cried about it for a while and then I pivoted. So I called my early team. I said, we have a problem. Whoever it was has basically leaked this information, which is their job. I don't hold them against. It's not their fault, but they basically have told everybody that we're doing this app and that it's coming out and that I'm behind it. But they're kind of missing the point of what the product really is. I think they're misunderstanding why we're starting this. I think for them, it read more of like in a revenge novel, right? Which was not the case. It was about Merci then evolving into a positive dating space. So I said, okay, you're all jumping out of an airplane tomorrow. And they're like, what do you mean I'm jumping out of an airplane tomorrow? And I said, you have to explain that it's just not that scary to talk first on an app as a woman. Like if women can jump out of an airplane, they can certainly send the first message. And so we just pivoted and we went and filmed this little launch video of literally my first 3 employees jumping out of an airplane. And the whole tagline was, it was something along the lines of like, if we can jump out of an airplane, you can send the first text. And that was kind of how we reframed the discussion and took control of the narrative.
That point about your right to kind of reinvent yourself and not be defined by a previous chapter, I think is so important. It's also why, I gotta be honest, like I don't love talking about it, like the Tinder stuff, because it's a step in your journey. It's an important contextual step.
Yeah, of course.
It's inspired you in many ways in terms of your mission and your vision and all of those things. But I'm glad we could fill that context. When I asked the question about your hardest moment, the darkest times, I was reflecting on some of the quotes I'd read about when you were in that moment feeling like maybe life wasn't worth living anymore.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing. And it's hard to, I think for a lot of people, I hope it's hard for them to understand that mindset, like getting to that place. I hope it's hard for them to understand. I hope they've never had to experience it. But for someone that has, What is that like? Are those words real? That prospect of like maybe life would be better without me in it.
I most certainly felt that way at times, for sure. Leaving, when I was going through that chapter, I most certainly had moments where I thought, well, this is it. I mean, what now? There's a whole persona that's been created about me out there in the world. How am I ever going to escape this? I'm going to be suffocated by a definition a group of strangers have assigned to me. And my tribe is gone. I'm gone. Everything I can identify with, this startup world can feel like a cult at times, right? And so that all felt gone. And I told you earlier, you disassociate from a lot of the life you once had, friends, family. You lose connection with them when you're trying to build something, right? And so when you leave that thing you're building, it's not like, okay, well, let me just go home to grandma's house. That doesn't feel like an option. You don't feel like you can relate to anyone anymore. And I just did not understand what the point was anymore. But it was right in that moment, literally. I want to say like that was the same piece of the same storm of feeling such a deep pain in such a deep problem, which the problem to me was the toxic internet and how toxic it could be and how detrimental it could be for your mental health, that a solution came. And so I really channeled that dark, dark, dark loathing and pain. And instead of drowning in it, I kind of started swimming as fast as I could for air. And my air was go rebuild yourself, right? And so I think that's ultimately the way I was able to reframe that. And I think the internet can make you feel very alone and very isolated and very lonely. And we start believing it as our reality, right? What the internet says is not really what's in the park across the street. And I think that's important for people to hear, is that whatever you're feeling based on what people are saying on the internet or whatever you've read, turn off the phone for a little bit and go outside, right? Because I didn't do that in that moment. And I think we have to realize that it's not always our reality.
Very powerful. This leads to Bumble, which was a game changer in its industry. It was the first of its kind. It was the first of its kind in many respects, including just the look and feel and messaging. That's really, as a marketeer, that's the thing I always respected. I mean, I really respected the point of women getting to go first, because I'd never seen that before. I'd never seen that done in the way that it's done on Bumble. But from a marketeer's mindset, I really respected how bold, how clear, how much Bumble were willing to position themselves as the antithesis, the opposite of everything else that existed. It was really willing to bring a new concept and a new idea to the market. When you look back at the earliest days of Bumble, like the first year, 2 years of Bumble, now with the hindsight of knowing how the dots connected, why did you win?
I'm not sure. Did we win? I still feel like
Listen, how many customers did you have over the years?
We have a lot.
A lot.
We have
and that's an interesting point, that it doesn't feel like you've won.
Oh, no. Okay, so this is crazy. I, in my head, still feel like we're tiny. Genuinely. I'm not even just saying that to you. Like the concept of going public and all of these things, in my mind, I go to the office every day and I'm like, okay, how are we going to get off the ground? Like literally, I don't think you understand. I'm genuinely locked in a place of, we have so much more to do and we have so much more growth to be had, that I feel like it's a reset every day. So I will say,
how is it possible to be happy when you're never there?
But it's not that I'm never there in a personal sense. It's not like I'm like, oh, I don't feel like validate. It's not that anymore. It's that there are still billions of people around the world that have never heard about Bumble. And there are still millions and millions and millions of women around the world right now in bad relationships. toxic relationships where they don't understand that they should, can, and eventually will go first in their life. They can leave a bad relationship. They can go into a good relationship. There are women, as we speak, you know very well, we're all watching this unfold. It's absolutely heartbreaking. Just advocating to be able to have simple freedoms. Just wanting to have the freedom to exist in their society as an equal. So when I go to the office every day and saying, okay, how are we going to launch? We're 132 years away from gender parity. Maybe 136, okay? Either way, it's not great. And so that's where I feel like I don't have enough time in this lifetime to achieve what I want to achieve. Forget the personal accolades. And I don't care about that stuff. I am personally on a personal level now, thank God. It's required a lot of, self-care, therapy, wonderful husband, beautiful to healthy children. Thank you, God. I am happy now, but I'm not happy about where women are globally. And that I feel unfulfilled because until we really look around us and say women are not in these toxic, terrible relationships and living in an unequal playing field, I have got to go to work. I got to get back to the office. And that's how I feel.
Pursuing that goal comes somewhat at the expense of yourself in some degree, right? Whether that's your, because life could be easier if you just decided not to pursue that goal. It could be easier.
Yeah, I could probably be drinking pina coladas on a beach somewhere right now.
So I always think about this, the pursuit of this of a goal versus self-preservation and taking care of yourself. And you seem like someone that is somewhat willing to sacrifice themselves to a degree, sacrifice something to fulfill a goal that might even hurt yourself in your own life in a sense of psychological harm or balance or, definitely sleep.
Yeah. No, this is probably the biggest, this is the balancing act we all talk about, right? But you can't do it all every single day.
Why not go to the beach? Why not go and have a pina colada? And
you want to go have a pina colada on the beach?
No, but let me
ask you the same thing, okay? There's got to be a group therapy for why won't you go have the pina colada on the beach? I don't know. I feel very passionate about what I'm doing. And when I stop feeling passionate, I'll go have a pina colada and then I'll go do something different. But it feels like my life's work. And I try to be a good mom and I try to be a good wife and I try to be a good to myself and take those times. And I think anyone that sits around and tells you oh, it's all about balance. And I mean, maybe they're right. Maybe they've got some secret that I don't know about. But my God, I don't think any day is fully balanced, right? I don't think any of us go to sleep every night feeling wow, I just got a 10 out of 10 on every single category today. I think you just do your best. And for me, I get joy out of pushing this brand forward. I get joy out of the women that come up to me and tell me that they were in an abusive marriage for 20 years and read a story about Bumble and left their spouse and got on Bumble and are happy in healthy relationships. That's what this is all about for me.
It looked like that question made you a bit emotional.
Yeah, I am emotional about it because I'm kind of doing this for my 17-year-old self also, right? I don't want another generation of me at 17. I don't want another generation of that. I don't want another generation of young women that felt unworthy and felt lesser than and felt like they needed a man to tell them what to do. And I don't want to see that as this next wave of 17-year-olds. So I also don't want to see all these women suffering from domestic and emotional abuse across the world. So, there's lots of ways and a lot of people around the world that are doing a lot to fix this, but I don't have those skill sets. I don't have, maybe I don't know how to do what they know how to do, and I know how to do this. So I feel like I better just lean in while I can. And plus, I'm definitely old for the Gen Z people out there, but I'm 33, so I feel like, I might have a little bit more in me somewhere.
If you're old, I'm old. So I thought we're
How
both
old are
young.
you?
I just turned 30. So
Wait, you're 3 years younger than me. That's like
I just turned 30.
it's like 5 decades younger than me.
No, it's not. We're in the same school.
Well, happy birthday, whenever it was.
Yeah, it was about a couple of weeks ago.
Well, happy birthday.
Do you want a tissue?
No, I'm okay.
You sure? You're cool.
Yeah.
That for me, that answer really answers a lot of questions because it shows where the drive is coming from. And that's the reason why the pina coladas seem like a lower priority than the mission. Going back to the question, which I kind of took us off on a tangent away from, about why you think Bumble won or was successful, was able to break through into that very small category of dating apps or your dating sites where there's really only like a handful of real players. Why? Because I know, I have to say something. I know that the other dating apps, because I was sometimes in the room, tried to launch dating apps of themselves. So they took their existing network, they tried to launch a new dating app into it, and it didn't work.
Yeah.
I've seen it happen over and over again. I know Michelle.
Yeah,
from
she's
Peanuts.
great.
She's one of the people I used to work with when we were doing the marketing at Badoo.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
She's. I think what she's done is awesome.
Yeah, I love Peanut. It's great, but I know it's not easy, and I know it's not chance, and I know it's not luck because I've seen. I can't tell you at Social Chain how many times we had dating apps come to us and say, "Can you do our marketing?" Maybe 200 times.
There's 5,000 dating apps in the App Store?
It's impossible. It's impossible. It's almost
impossible.
impossible to start a new one because of the network effects and all of those things.
It's impossible.
Impossible. So why you? How you? How?
Every other dating product until Bumble had been solving for the wrong side of the coin. They've been thinking about men. That's all. They woke up in the morning and thought about how to make a dating app good for guys. And they had it backwards. Why are you solving for men when this is all about what women need and what women want? No one was asking women. You think women want to get abused on the internet? Think again. Like, find me a woman that enjoys being harassed on a dating app. Not one. But for some reason, that problem didn't strike anyone as a problem. So it's not that hard to say, wait a second, this is a double-sided marketplace. This product can't survive without women, yet we're exploiting and degrading women on a lot of these products, not naming any names. What? And so for me, it was all about taking that original concept of Merci, a kind space for women, a safe space for women. And to Andre's push, gotta give him some credit for being so interested in dating, right? I was so turned off of dating. I wanted nothing to do with dating. When Andre was like, oh, let's do a dating, come be my CMO. I was like, first of all, I'm not for hire. I'm starting my own company. I must be founder and CEO of whatever I do next. I cannot work for someone. I have to be my own boss. And, I got to give him a lot of credit because he trusted that. And he said, okay, do whatever you want to do. But my one stipulation is it has to be in dating because I know dating. And I want to get behind a dating product. So when I was sitting there, we had kind of agreed to, okay, we're going to do this dating app. What's it going to be? Well, what about Merci? I want it to be Merci. I want it to be about women, and I want to be women only. I want safety and kindness and accountability. There's no internet spaces for women. Nothing's been built for women. We have to do this for women. And then it kind of just all clicked. And I sat there, and within literally minutes, it all just wrote itself. I said, wait a second. I know the problem. Women don't go first. Men do. Men message as many women as they can. Women are getting inundated. They never respond. The lack of response is causing a rejection, and the rejection is triggering an aggression. And that aggression is now translating into harassment. And this is why women are being abused on the dating apps, because if only they would go first, the man wouldn't feel rejected. They'd feel empowered. It would totally calibrate this whole experience. And I said, okay, great. I know what we're going to do. Women have to talk first on this product. And they only have 24 hours to do it. I knew nobody else could conceptualize the way I would explain it. So I was like, think Cinderella, the pumpkin and the carriage. And men can send one extend on time of day. to capture their attention if they want to. Now, we have to also call out something. This was back in 2014 in a very heterosexual-oriented dating app experience. The landscape has evolved. We have to be inclusive to all. And so, of course, we are. And of course, we are currently, as we speak, spending countless time and putting all of our heart and soul into how to make the experience better for non-binary, for the trans community, for anybody that identifies as a woman as well, right? And so that's a big portion of the future. But that was really how I would say we became successful because of two things. Women, making sure that we were solving for women's real problems on the internet, marketing to women. So when I went back to those sororities and fraternities, instead of going in with, whatever we had gone in at Tinder, I went in with things for women. I went in with items women wanted, cute yellow cookies. Like, I understood that we are going to build a cute brand, not a sexy brand. And that's what set us apart. I wanted it to feel warm and cozy and inviting and soft and feminine and safe. And that's the beginning and still the current through line of Bumble.
What do you like as a leader? Because leadership has evolved, over the last 10, 20 years, from like the Steve Jobs days where you've got this kind of tyrant that, from what I've heard, so hard to deal with that they put him in his own building and only people could work in that building if they were really resilient. I heard all these stories. I spoke to Woz. Woz didn't tell me that, but Woz is the closest I've ever got to Steve Jobs. But leadership and the concept of what a leader looks like and how they behave and how they treat people in a post-internet world where we have the ability to speak up because we can tweet and Glassdoor and all of these things. Leadership has changed. Our perceptions of it, how they behave. In a post-pandemic world, leaders are much more vulnerable because I think a lot of them had to be really vulnerable during the pandemic to guide their teams through. What if I asked your teams, if I said, what's Whitney like as a leader, what would they say to me?
I feel like I try. And so, I'm sure I could be told otherwise. I try to be empathetic and I try to think about everyone around me, probably to my detriment, honestly. I think it's probably done me more harm than good over the years because I'm trying to solve for every single person in the room that maybe it doesn't solve anything sometimes. But I try to just be the brand we are externally, internally. It's hard. There's so many conflicting needs as a business. You have a marketing and brand team that want to do one thing. You have a technical team that needs to do another. You have IPO teams that have to do another. And so you end up being this conductor of a very loud orchestra. And I try to create harmony with people, but I don't know. I guess I wouldn't say I follow I don't read leadership books. I don't take leadership courses. Maybe that's something I should do. I don't know, but I just lead with my gut. I just do what feels right. I try to do the right thing. I try to listen and hear what people are saying, and I try to listen to other people too. So if one person calls me and says X, Y, or Z, I try to call the other person and say, what's your version of this? Before I jump to a conclusion, I really try to have compassion for where everybody's coming from, but it's tough. And then I also have to put my head down and say, okay, no, sometimes this is just how it's going to go, right? Because I feel like I can see certain things that maybe aren't present to everyone in the dating space because I've been in this thing for a decade now and I feel like I understand the nuances of it very well. So I don't know. I don't know what they would say.
You talked about creating harmony amongst the orchestra, which I feel like is the perfect example of the role of a CEO. But a role of the CEO of a public company becomes even more difficult because then you have even more conflicting expectations. When you're that person that's trying to create a harmony in all of this orchestra, keep everybody happy, meet all the needs, how do you create harmony within yourself?
So I personally have beliefs that there's something bigger than what we're dealing with every day, right? Like I try to zoom out into something that we can't even see, right? There's obviously influences of the universe that none of us know about. You and I cannot sit here and say that we know every corner of why we exist and what's going to happen tomorrow. And so I try to just trust the process. I try to laugh. Andre was always really good at that. He would just laugh in really stressful situations. And I learned that from him. It's just like, have a laugh. You'll be okay. And also to realize that we are just a blip on the radar. Like this is going to be, if we're lucky, like Bumble will be like a half page in a book one day, hundreds of years from now. Like it's just not that big of a deal, the daily dramas and the nuances of everything. And so I try to just zoom out. Like, is this really going to still matter? This one moment in interpersonal dynamics or this one moment in a failed launch or whatever it might be, is this really going to matter in 5 years? Is this going to matter in 5 months? And I really try to do that exercise of like, how big of a deal is this before I allow it to disrupt my harmony? Does that make sense? I don't know if that made any sense at all.
It does make sense. It does make sense. I was reading things about your sort of sleep work routine, and you sounded a lot like me. I'm the type of person that has a fairly unhealthy relationship with my phone throughout the early hours of the morning, especially when I was running the company, especially when I was at Social Chain still. I'd wake up in the middle of the night. I was worried too often when we couldn't make payroll, and I knew it was payday in a week. I'd be riddled with little sort of slithers of anxiety. When we spoke to, I think it's Robbie.
Oh yeah, he's great.
Robbie in your team. Robbie said she makes no pretense of being always strong and is openly vulnerable with the team. Where you might walk into the office one day and let them know that you've been struggling with something. You might be anxious or struggling with anxiety that day, and encourage your other team members, if they're feeling the same way, to take the time that they need.
Well, that's really nice of him. But yeah, I mean, vulnerability it has to be authentic. I've watched so many people the last few years ride this vulnerability trend. And I'm like, that's not real vulnerable. Like vulnerability can't be a scapegoat or an exit or a crutch. For me, I don't know. I just tell the truth. If I'm having postpartum depression after my first baby, I would just say that to my all hands because that was the truth. And why would I be anything other than truthful? If I want to lead a company that tells the truth and I want to run a business that instills behaviors that are truthful and healthy and better, like why would I want to operate in any way that's disingenuous to that? So I just get up and just try to tell the truth.
Convention would say, well, that's not, leaders are strong and then that they don't have any problems and they're always tough and so what if, and this is honestly what I used to worry about. I used to think, well, if I'm truly honest that things affect me too, my team are going to think I'm weak and then I can't lead them. And that's the kind of narrative that ran out in my head.
Yeah. And I get that. But the reality is everyone's feeling something. And I'm in a connection business. How can I run a connection company if I can't connect? And the only way you can connect is through vulnerability. It's the only way to connect with anyone. I'm being very vulnerable with you right now because we're sitting here connecting. So I might as well, I could sit here and be like, well, some business book I read, there's this theory of like, this many hours a day do this. And like, that's just not my vibe.
If we sit here in 10 years' time and we say that was a really successful 10 years for Bumble, what would have happened in those 10 years?
We would have built world-class features that were industry-changing for safety and trust on the internet. We would have become the safest platform for women not only to date, but to find any trusted contact that they need. A mentor, a mentee, a babysitter, a friend, somebody that has the same illness as them, as rare as it might be, somebody who is struggling with any type of mental health crisis, the platform to find anyone on a trusted, safe wavelength. And we would have also gone and created a suite of laws to actually build real legislature around the gaps that exist for physical and digital accountability as it pertains to women's well-being. And we would have scaled globally to every corner of the earth where women need us the most. And we would be a trusted product for them to find their innate strength to quite literally make the first move out of something bad and into something good. And we would have built a brand that showed everybody that you can have mission and profit, live under the same roof, and you can be a kinder, connected company, irrespective of how everybody else has done it before. So that's what I would hope for.
Thank you. Understanding you and understanding what's driving you, I would certainly bet on that becoming a reality. And I think that's really, of all the business success, the marketing brilliance, and all of the things that you've done, and the resilience and the getting back up and all of those things that in and of themselves, we described them in a couple of minutes, but any human that's struggled and been rejected and had been mischaracterized knows that those aren't small things. So for many people, even one of those things is entirely fatal. But there's clearly this unbelievable resilience in you, because you said, well, where does that, I think you said it on a podcast one time where you said, it doesn't matter if you lose your confidence, you still have your drive. Mm-hmm. And I really pondered that when you said that. I thought, is that true? Because I was thinking, if you lose your confidence, you still have, well, you do. You still have the drive, whether you have the belief that comes from confidence that you can have it, but you still have that drive. And that's exactly what I've learned from you today, which is that unshakable, bigger than myself, a mission bigger than me drive, which is driving you and your company. And that's why I think you're an unbelievable inspiration. But Bumble is an unbelievable bet on the future, a future which I think is inevitable and a future that is necessary. So thank you for your time today. Honestly, when I say it's a huge honor, I mean it's a huge honor.
I feel the same way about you. So thank you for having me today.
We have a closing tradition on the podcast where the last guest asks a question for the next guest. They don't know who they're leaving it for. So they just leave it in the diary. I open it and I get to read it now. The question they left for you, not knowing it was you, was, what is the last belief you would relinquish? It's an interesting question.
Like, what would I let go of? What belief do I have? Like, is there a belief I have that I would let go of?
Yeah. So shouldn't give away who it is. He means like, it's basically what's the most important belief to you? What's the last belief that you would give up?
Oh, the last belief that I would give up is that people are inherently good somewhere deep down. That rejection and insecurity and lack of communication drive cruelty, and that I'm not going to give up on a world where we can actually connect good people together, because I think there's a lot of good people out there that just need a kinder way to connect.
Amen. Thank you, Whitney.
Thank you.
Quick one. Some of you may know we've got a brand new sponsor for this podcast. It's American Express. And this partnership still blows my mind as I'm an avid user of American Express. So with that being said, let me tell you about their new Business Platinum Card benefits. Firstly, new card members will receive a £200 annual travel credit to be spent when you spend at American Express Travel Online on flights, hotels, and car rentals. Secondly, if you need help with your expenses, then American Express business cards offer Amex Expense, which is simply a brand new and free expenses management service for its business platinum card holders, where you just need to upload your receipts and invoices as you go. This streamlined system can be integrated with your accounting software. You will also be able to monitor and generate expense reports straight through Amex Expense platform, a total game changer, and it saved me so much time. And lastly, as an American Express Business Platinum Card member, you have access to a wide variety of American Express offers, including digital subscription to The Times, The Sunday Times, worth £300. So if you'd like to find out how you can get your hands on your new American Express Business Card, then search American Express Business Platinum Card to find out more. Quick one from our longest standing sponsor, Huel. I can't tell you over the last, really it's been about 2.5 years. It was really post-pandemic, how much my health has become such a huge priority in my life. And I have this laser focused on what I'm putting into my body. It's funny because as you get older, you can start to feel the things you're putting into your body more and more and more. And if I put something into my body, especially things like gluten, if I put those things in my body, I feel them tremendously the next day, my energy levels, my sleep and everything in between. Huel has been probably the most important partner in my health journey, because I've been in the boardrooms, I've been to their offices tens of times. I've seen how they make their decisions on nutrition. and I trust it. Most of my team that are in this room with me consume it and get the benefits of it too. So if you haven't already tried Huel, do so.